is the future already written? That question depends on how you understand time, choice, and causality. Some say everything is predetermined, like a movie already filmed, just waiting to be played scene by scene. Others believe the future is unwritten and shaped by every decision we make. The truth is more complex than either extreme. It sits somewhere between physics, psychology, and philosophy. In classical physics, the world works like a machine. Isaac Newton imagined the universe as a giant clock. If you knew the position and velocity of every particle, you could calculate the future with perfect accuracy. This view is called determinism. In a deterministic universe, the future is just the inevitable outcome of the past and present. Your thoughts, feelings, and choices are all part of that machine, just highly complex patterns of matter obeying fixed laws. But quantum mechanics disrupted that picture. At the smallest scales, particles behave unpredictably. You can't know both the position and speed of a particle exactly. This uncertainty introduces probabilities into physical outcomes. A radioactive atom might decay in the next minute, or it might not. There's no hidden gear ticking away behind the scenes that can tell you in advance. So in that sense, the future contains elements of chance. Still, randomness isn't the same as freedom. If your future depends on a random quantum event, that doesn't make it your choice. It just replaces certainty with unpredictability. For the future to be open in a meaningful way, your choices must play a role. That brings us to free will. Some say free will is an illusion. Your brain is a physical system shaped by biology, experience, and environment. Every thought or action comes from prior causes. You feel like you're making decisions, but you're just following a chain of events that began before you were born. In that view, the future may feel open, but it's already baked in. It just hasn't happened yet. Others argue that free will is real, even if the brain obeys physical laws. They say that choice arises from complex interactions, feedback loops between reason, emotion, memory, and context. You're not a puppet on strings. You're a system with the ability to weigh options, reflect, and select among alternatives. From this angle, the future isn't fixed. It's shaped by the paths you choose to walk. Philosophers break this debate into camps. Hard determinists believe the future is set and freedom is an illusion. Libertarians, not the political kind, believe in free will and an open future. Compatibilists take a middle road. They say determinism and free will can coexist. You're free if you act according to your motives and values, even if those are shaped by prior causes. In that view, the future is partly written and partly emerging. There's also the idea of block time, which comes from Einstein's theory of relativity. Time is not a flowing river, but a dimension like space. Past, present, and future all exist at once, like pages in a book. You're just reading through them in order. To someone outside of time, if such a view existed, the entire book would be visible at once. Your future would already exist, just unread by you. But this doesn't mean you're just acting out a script. From your point of view, you still choose, struggle, and adapt. The story unfolds with every step you take. Some spiritual traditions also believe the future is written. In Hinduism, for example, karma carries consequences across lifetimes. Every action plants a seed that ripens into a future outcome. In Christianity, some believe in predestination, the idea that God already knows who will be saved. These views suggest that a deeper plan exists, even if it's hidden from human sight. But not all believers accept that interpretation. Many see life as a dance between destiny and effort, where divine knowledge doesn't erase human choice. Even if the future is partly set, it doesn't mean it's fully known. You may be heading toward a certain event, but the way you face it still matters. Two people might be dealt the same hand, but played in very different ways. Fate may shape the stage, but you still write the script. Let's take a simple example. You're driving a car toward a cliff. If no one intervenes, you'll go over the edge. In that sense, your future is written, but at any moment you can steer away. You can brake, turn, or stop. The danger is real, but not final. The path is probable, not inevitable. Another example, a person raised in poverty may be statistically more likely to struggle. That's not destiny, it's pressure. It shapes their odds, not their outcome. They still have agency. Their decisions can break the pattern. The future bends under effort. But effort alone isn't enough. Systems, luck, and timing matter too. So the future isn't a blank slate or a fixed script. It's more like a web of tendencies with room for action. Memory gives us a clear record of the past. But what we call the future is only a set of expectations. Plans, dreams, fears, and predictions. We project those onto tomorrow. We don't see what's coming, we guess. And those guesses shape how we act. That's why believing the future is flexible can change how it unfolds. If you believe it's fixed, you may stop trying. If you believe it's open, you may keep going. People live differently when they believe their actions matter. A soldier facing battle, a parent raising a child, an artist finishing a painting. Each act says, the future can be different because of what I do now. That belief has power. It drives progress, courage, and hope. It may not guarantee the outcome, but it keeps the wheel turning. We also rewrite the meaning of the past from the standpoint of the future. A failure may become a turning point. A loss may plant the seed for growth. The future doesn't just grow out of the past. It gives the past its meaning. That relationship runs both ways. So is the future already written? Some parts probably are. Physical laws set limits. Causes have effects. But within those bounds, life grows. Decisions matter. Awareness matters. If the future were fully written, there would be no reason to act. But we act anyway. We love, we fight, we build. Not because we know the outcome, but because the act itself is worth doing. Uncertainty gives life its shape. Risk gives meaning to bravery. Hope matters precisely because the future isn't known. If the ending were already carved in stone, nothing would be at stake. But everything is. That's why the question matters, and why we keep asking it. Are good and evil absolute or relative? The answer depends on how you define morality and where you believe it comes from. Some say good and evil are fixed, eternal truths. Others say they depend on culture, context, and perspective. Both views have logic behind them, and both raise problems. If good and evil are absolute, then moral truths exist independent of opinion. Killing the innocent is wrong, always. Lying, stealing, harming others, wrong, no matter who you are or where you live. This view suggests there is a moral law, like a law of physics, built into the fabric of reality. Whether people recognize it or not doesn't change its truth. Much like gravity doesn't vanish just because someone denies it, good and evil remain fixed even when ignored or violated. This idea often appears in religion. In Christianity, for example, God is the source of moral law. What is good reflects God's nature. To do good is to live in line with that nature. Islam, Judaism, and other faiths hold similar beliefs. In this view, morality is not up for debate. It is revealed, not invented. If God says something is good, then it is, regardless of how we feel about it. Secular philosophers have also tried to define absolute morality without religion. Immanuel Kant believed that morality comes from reason. He argued that any action you take should be able to become a universal law. If it's wrong for one person to lie, it's wrong for everyone to lie, every time. Kant called this the categorical imperative. He saw moral duty as grounded in rational logic, not personal opinion. But this leads to complications. What do you do when moral duties collide? Is it wrong to lie to save a life? An absolute rule might say yes, lying is always wrong. But our instincts push back. It feels more right to protect a life than to protect the truth. That tension shows how rigid absolutes can break under human pressure. Now look at the other side. If good and evil are relative, they depend on culture, time, and individual perspective. What one group sees as moral, another may call evil. In ancient Sparta, leaving weak infants to die was normal. It served the state's idea of strength. In today's world, that would be murder. Were the Spartans evil or just different? Moral relativism says you can't judge them by today's standards. Right and wrong are not fixed but shaped by needs, beliefs and values that shift over time. This flexibility allows moral systems to adapt. Slavery was once common across the world. Today it's almost universally condemned. Women were denied basic rights for centuries. Now many societies see gender equality as a moral requirement. If morality were absolute, how could it change so drastically? Relativists say that morality evolves just like language, law, or fashion. It reflects human conditions, not timeless truths. But relativism has its own weaknesses. If all morals are just opinions, how do you condemn cruelty or injustice? If a society believes genocide is acceptable, does that make it right for them? That conclusion feels dangerous. It suggests there's no solid ground to stand on when confronting evil. It can also lead to moral paralysis. If everyone is right in their own way, how can you argue for human rights, justice, or dignity? The truth may sit somewhere in between. Some moral instincts seem nearly universal. Most cultures agree that murder, theft, and betrayal are wrong. Most value fairness, loyalty, and care for others. These patterns suggest that morality isn't entirely random. Evolutionary psychology offers one explanation. We are social animals. Behaviours that promote group survival, honesty, cooperation, protection of the young, tend to be seen as good. Actions that damage the group, violence, deceit, selfishness, are seen as bad. In this view, morality grows from practical needs, not abstract rules. Take empathy. Most people feel pain when they see others suffer. That emotional response drives moral behaviour. If you see a child fall, you want to help. You don't need a commandment or a law, you feel it. This kind of built-in moral sense appears across cultures. It doesn't guarantee people always act well, but it creates a common starting point. Still, cultural values do shape how that instinct plays out. In some cultures, loyalty to family is the highest good. In others, justice matters more. Some societies prize individual freedom. Others focus on harmony and obedience. These differences don't mean there's no truth in morality. They mean that moral truth often wears local clothing. A good example is the concept of honour. In some parts of the world, defending honour is a sacred duty. An insult might justify violence. In other places, honour has little moral weight. What matters more is tolerance or non-violence. So which is right? You can't answer that without asking deeper questions. Does this behaviour lead to more life, more dignity, more well-being, or does it lead to suffering and fear? One test of a moral system is what it produces. If a code of ethics protects the vulnerable, limits cruelty, and creates trust, it has moral weight. If it leads to oppression, terror, or decay, it's flawed. You don't need to agree on every value to recognise outcomes. A belief that causes harm is harder to defend than one that promotes health. Think about Nazi Germany. The regime created a moral framework based on racial superiority. It was internally consistent, but it led to genocide. No matter how you justify it, that result is evil. Even if many people believed it at the time, the outcome shows it as moral failure. So some acts cross a line. They violate something deeper than culture. They go against the basic conditions that make life possible and bearable. Maybe good and evil are not fully absolute or fully relative. Maybe they are grounded in human realities, how we suffer, how we flourish, how we relate. Those facts don't change across time or culture. Hunger, fear, pain, love, these experiences connect us. A moral code that respects those realities moves closer to truth. So when you ask if good and evil are absolute or relative, you're really asking, is there something beyond opinion that makes an act right or wrong? The answer may be yes, but not in a rigid or mystical way. It may lie in the shared human condition, the fact that we feel, we hope, we hurt, we care. Morality built on that foundation is not floating in the sky, but rooted in the ground. You don't need a perfect system to know some things are wrong. Torturing the innocent, abusing the weak. These don't require debate. The body recoils, the mind resists. You don't need to be told. They strike something in you. And you don't need a grand theory to know that kindness matters. Helping a stranger, speaking the truth, protecting the helpless. These actions feel right because they affirm something real. They build a world worth living in. So perhaps good and evil are not just rules to follow or opinions to debate. Maybe they are signals, ways of pointing to what helps us live better together. Not perfect, not fixed, not fully relative, just real enough to matter. Is reality just a simulation? That question sounds like science fiction, but serious thinkers have debated it. Philosophers, physicists, and computer scientists have all explored it. Some argue that reality may not be what it seems. What we experience as solid, consistent, and real might be data processed inside a vast computational system. This idea isn't easy to prove or disprove, but it forces us to ask, what is real? And how would we even know if it wasn't? The simulation hypothesis suggests that everything we see, feel, and think might be part of a highly advanced simulation. Like a video game, only far more detailed and immersive. We wouldn't be aware of it because the simulation would include our memories, our logic, and our sense of self. To us, it would feel completely normal. The colours, the pain, the thoughts, all part of the program. The modern version of this idea came from philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. He proposed a simple argument with 3 parts. First, he said, eventually, some civilizations might become advanced enough to simulate entire universes with conscious beings inside. Second, if those simulations are possible, a single civilization could create millions or billions of them. Third, if that's true, then the number of simulated realities would far outweigh the number of original ones. That means, statistically, we're more likely to be inside one of those simulations than the real original universe. It's a probability argument. Like rolling 1,000,000 dice and assuming you probably didn't get the only one that landed on real. But even if the numbers check out, there are deeper problems. How do you define simulation? What counts as real? Are simulated beings truly conscious or just following code? People often picture this like the Matrix, a giant computer tricking people with artificial senses. But it might be more subtle. You don't need a human-shaped body and a pod to live in a simulation. If your brain's entire experience is built from electrical signals, and those signals are being controlled or generated, then your reality is already virtual. Whether the source is neurons or algorithms doesn't change your experience. One challenge is that the idea can't be tested easily. If we're in a perfect simulation, every test we try could also be simulated. Every clue, every piece of evidence, even our doubts, could be built into the system. That makes the theory unfalsifiable. In science, a good theory needs to make predictions that can be proven wrong. If a theory explains everything but can't be tested, it risks becoming meaningless. But some thinkers still try. They look for signs of limits in our universe. For example, is there a smallest possible length or time, like pixels or frames in a video game? Quantum physics suggests there might be. The Planck length and Planck time are the smallest meaningful units of space and time. Below that scale, the idea of location or duration breaks down. That sounds like a digital system with a maximum resolution. Others point to the strange behavior of particles in quantum mechanics. A particle can exist in multiple states at once until it's observed. That sounds like something waiting to be rendered, like a video game that only loads what you look at. If reality is computational, it would make sense to optimize performance this way. Don't waste processing power on places or events that no one is observing. Still, those are just metaphors. Quantum weirdness doesn't prove a simulation. It just means our universe behaves in ways we don't fully understand. Physics uses math to describe those behaviors, but that doesn't mean the universe is a computer. Equations are tools, not blueprints. Another clue people chase is artificiality. Is there something too neat or too orderly about the laws of physics? Some scientists think our universe is unusually fine-tuned for life. If certain physical constants were slightly different, stars wouldn't form, planets wouldn't exist, and life would be impossible. That precision makes some people suspicious. It could mean someone set the dials on purpose, like a programmer choosing the right settings for a playable world. But again, it's hard to say what's too perfect. If the universe weren't suited to life, we wouldn't be here to notice. That's called the anthropic principle. It doesn't prove we're in a simulation. It just means we're only able to observe a universe where observers like us can exist. Others approach the question from the angle of consciousness. If we can one day simulate human minds in machines, if digital consciousness becomes possible, then simulations of reality become more plausible. But we still don't understand what consciousness is. Is it just computation? Or is there something about being alive, embodied, or organic that we haven't captured? If consciousness requires something non-physical, then a computer might never simulate it. Still, we've made progress in modelling complex systems. Games today simulate weather, cities, economies, and behaviour. They grow more detailed each year. If technology keeps advancing, it's not crazy to imagine a world that looks and feels real but is entirely virtual. If we ever build one ourselves, it would make the simulation hypothesis more credible. We'd know such a thing is possible because we'd have done it. But the fact that something is possible doesn't mean it's true. Just because we could be simulated doesn't mean we are. Maybe advanced civilizations don't want to run simulations. Maybe they try, but fail. Maybe ethical rules stop them. Or maybe real consciousness can't be copied. The gap between possibility and reality is wide. Then there's the emotional part. Some people hate the idea of living in a simulation. It feels dehumanizing, like our lives are fake. Others find it comforting. If this world is simulated, maybe there's a higher intelligence watching over it. Maybe death isn't the end. Maybe glitches can be fixed. It starts to sound like religion in digital form. A creator, a purpose, and a hidden reality beyond the visible one. But comfort isn't proof. Whether we like the idea or not doesn't affect whether it's true, and truth still matters. If we live in a simulation, then we should try to understand who built it, why they built it, and what rules they follow. If we don't live in a simulation, then reality is still mysterious enough to deserve our attention. Stars burn. People think. Time moves forward. That's already strange. Whether or not it's running on code, some say it doesn't matter. If a simulated world feels real, then for all practical purposes it is real. If pain hurts, if joy uplifts, if choice matters, then experience remains valid. You don't need to know the source code to live a meaningful life. And if the simulation is so good that you can't tell, then your behaviour inside it is still your own. So you keep going. You care for others, you face challenges, you try to do good, not because you know what the world is, but because this is the world you have. If it's simulated, let it be the best version it can be. If it's not, the same rules apply. You don't need to know the frame rate to know that time is precious. Can meaning exist without language? That question reaches into how we think, how we feel, and how we understand the world. Language helps us express meaning. But is it the source of meaning, or just a tool to communicate it? If you strip away words, do you also strip away meaning? Or does something remain, raw, silent, but still understood? Start with basic life. A newborn baby doesn't know any words, but it reacts to its environment. It feels hunger, pain, warmth, fear. A baby cries, reaches, turns away. These aren't linguistic acts, but they carry meaning. Hunger means food is missing. A mother's touch means safety. The baby doesn't describe this in sentences, but it experiences it fully. The body reacts to meaning without any need for language. Animals do this too. A dog wags its tail, growls, crouches, runs. It doesn't think in sentences, but it navigates a world of cause and effect, trust and danger. A cat knows which human feeds it. A bird senses which branch is safe to land on. These creatures operate in a world thick with meaning, what to chase, what to avoid, what brings comfort. Their brains respond to patterns, signals, intentions. They don't need words for meaning to shape their choices. Even in humans, much of meaning isn't spoken. Think of music. It moves people deeply. A sad tune feels heavy. A fast rhythm makes the body want to move. You don't need to describe it. The experience carries its own meaning. Art does the same. A painting, a gesture, a glance. These things speak without language. They tap into layers of awareness that lie below the level of speech. Some people lose access to language through injury or illness. Stroke patients with aphasia may not form complete sentences, but they can still feel love, anger, frustration. They may smile, cry, hug. They recognize faces. They grasp emotional tones. Meaning doesn't vanish when language breaks down. It takes other routes. It survives in the body, in the eyes, in the silence between sounds. There's also the matter of intuition. You walk into a room and sense tension. No one says anything, but you feel it. Or you meet someone and feel instant trust or unease. These impressions come before words. They arrive as sensations, signals, impressions. You can later describe them, but you first experience them wordlessly. This suggests that meaning is not created by language. It's noticed by it, shaped by it, shared through it. Language helps you organize meaning. It lets you store it, reflect on it, pass it to others, but it isn't the source. It's more like a container. Meaning can exist without it, even if it becomes harder to grasp, name, or remember. Take dreams. They are full of meaning, not always clear but emotionally charged. You might dream of falling, running, flying, or meeting someone long gone. These images stir strong feelings. You wake up shaken or inspired. Only after waking do you try to turn the dream into words, but the dream existed before you explained it. Now think of trauma. Some experiences are so overwhelming they defy description. People often say, "I can't put it into words." That doesn't mean the experience lacks meaning. It means it exceeds the tools we usually use to express it. Pain, grief, awe, these often outrun language. You feel them before you explain them, and often you never do. Yet they shape your view of life, your choices, your sense of who you are. On the other side, some words carry no real meaning. Buzzwords, jargon, or empty talk might sound important, but say nothing. So language doesn't guarantee meaning either. You can speak a lot and say little. You can use elegant words and still miss the truth. Meaning needs clarity, honesty, and awareness, not just vocabulary. Children show us how meaning grows before language. A toddler points, imitates, experiments. They test the world long before they can explain it. They learn that certain actions lead to certain results, that meanings exist in gestures, objects, and routines. Language catches up later. First comes the experience, then the word. Think of touch. A hand on the shoulder, a hug, a firm handshake. These convey meaning immediately. You don't need to translate them into speech. They work through presence, not explanation. Cultures differ in how they use touch, but the underlying human response is similar. A gentle touch calms, a harsh one warns. Meaning exists in the act, not just in the telling. Now consider someone dying. In their last moments, words may fade, breathing slows, eyes close. There may be no speech, but there is still meaning. The presence of a loved one, the sound of a voice, the squeeze of a hand. These things don't need language to matter. In fact, they may carry more weight than any spoken farewell. The body holds memory and meaning even without words. A soldier may flinch at a sound. A survivor may avoid certain smells. A lover may feel joy from a familiar song. These reactions are not linguistic. They are embodied, stored not in sentences but in nerves and cells. They rise before thought, Language helps refine meaning. It lets us tell stories, build theories, make plans, but those stories rest on a foundation of experience, sensation, emotion, memory. You can't build meaning from words alone. Words ride on something deeper. They name what you already feel. They point toward what you already sense. That's why silence can be powerful in a courtroom, in prayer, at a funeral. Silence marks meaning. It holds space for what words can't reach. It doesn't mean emptiness. It means respect, presence, depth. In those moments, everyone understands, even without speaking. So yes, meaning can exist without language. It lives in emotion, movement, perception, memory. It shows up in touch, sound, space, and rhythm. Language helps shape and share it, but it doesn't create it from nothing. Meaning runs deeper than words. It is what makes words worth speaking in the first place. Do numbers exist, or are they just human constructs? This question sounds simple, but it touches on some of the deepest problems in philosophy and mathematics. It forces us to ask what it means for something to exist, and what role the human mind plays in shaping or discovering truth. Start with something basic. You see 3 apples on a table. You don't need a formal education to notice that there's a pattern there. More than one, less than many. You can count them. 1, 2, 3. That act feels natural. It doesn't take training to recognize that there are 3 things. Even animals can count to some extent. Crows, chimpanzees, and even some fish can recognize differences in quantity. They might not know the word 3, but they behave differently when there are 3 pieces of food versus 2. So something about numbers seems grounded in experience. But that's not the end of the story. Numbers go beyond what we can see. You can count to 1,000,000, but no one has ever laid eyes on 1,000,000 individual objects at once. You can write 1,000,000,000, even though no human could truly picture that many items in the mind. And numbers don't stop. You can always add 1 more. There's no last number. Infinity exists in theory, even if nothing infinite has ever been observed. That's where things get strange. Numbers stretch far beyond what we can touch, see, or measure, yet they feel real. This brings up the first way to view numbers, as discovered. According to mathematical Platonism, numbers exist in a realm outside space and time, like ideal forms. Just like a perfect triangle doesn't exist in the physical world but can still be described with precision, numbers are part of a timeless structure. In this view, we don't invent numbers, we discover them, the same way explorers discover new continents. Even if no humans had ever lived, the number 7 would still be a prime number. Pi would still be irrational. These truths are fixed. We just happen to notice them. Many mathematicians feel this way. They describe the process of doing math as uncovering something already there. They aren't making it up, they're pulling it out of the shadows. When they find a new proof or theorem, it feels more like a revelation than a creation. The logic fits together too tightly to be random. The elegance of the solution feels like evidence that they've stumbled into something real. But others take the opposite view. They argue that numbers are tools, not truths. In this view, numbers are human constructs, clever inventions used to model and organize the world. You can think of them like maps. A map doesn't exist in nature. It's a simplified representation we create to help us navigate. In the same way, the number 2 is a concept we invented to group things together. It doesn't exist apart from our minds. Without humans, there would be no symbols, no equations, no arithmetic, just objects behaving as they always have. Supporters of this view point out that the way we use numbers changes over time. The number 0 wasn't always part of math. Ancient Greeks didn't have it. Roman numerals didn't allow for easy multiplication or division. The idea of negative numbers was once seen as nonsense. Imaginary numbers were laughed at. Even today, there are debates over whether certain infinities are real. If numbers were fixed truths, why would our understanding of them shift so much? You can also look at how different cultures treat numbers. Some languages don't have words for large numbers. Some don't even go past 1, 2, and many. In those societies, math is still possible. but it's done differently. That suggests numbers are shaped by how we think and talk. If they were hard facts of the universe, like gravity or light, wouldn't they appear the same to everyone? Then again, math works too well to be just made up. You can use math to design a bridge, predict the orbit of a planet, or describe the structure of DNA. Equations developed on chalkboards end up sending rockets into space. A physicist can write down a formula in one country, and engineers can use it in another without ever meeting. That consistency feels like more than coincidence. It suggests that math is latching onto something deeper than cultural habit. Even when numbers start as abstract, they often lead to real-world insight. The square root of -1 seemed absurd when first proposed. Now it's essential for understanding electrical circuits and quantum mechanics. Non-Euclidean geometry once looked like a thought experiment. Now it's part of how we model space-time. These examples make it hard to believe math is just a game of symbols. Somehow it keeps revealing hidden truths about the world. One way to make sense of this is to say that numbers are both invented and discovered. The symbols and systems we use, like decimal points, fractions, or algebra, are inventions. But the patterns they reveal, like prime numbers, ratios, or limits, are discovered. Think of music. Notes and instruments are human creations. But the mathematical relationships between sounds, octaves, harmonics, intervals, exist in nature. We didn't create those patterns, we noticed them. Numbers might work the same way. The universe behaves in consistent, structured ways. We build mathematical systems to describe those behaviors. Some of those systems work, others don't. The ones that work reveal something real. They become the bridge between mind and world. Another way to think about it is through games. A game like chess has rules. Those rules are invented. But once they're in place, they create a space of fixed possibilities. There are only so many legal moves. Certain strategies are better than others. You didn't discover those rules. You made them, but you do discover what they allow. Math might be like that. We set up basic definitions, like numbers and operations, and then uncover what follows from them. The deeper we go, the less it feels like invention and the more it feels like exploration. So do numbers exist? If exist means physical presence, like a rock or a tree, then no. You can't trip over the number 5. It has no mass or shape. But if exist means being logically coherent, consistent and useful across all fields of knowledge, then numbers are as real as anything else we know. They shape how we build, measure, reason, and explore. Whether numbers are out there waiting to be discovered, or inside us waiting to be defined, they continue to work. They predict eclipses, they balance economies, they cure diseases. Even if they began as tools, they've grown into something more. Something stable, powerful, and oddly universal. That may be the closest we get to truth. Is the mind separate from the brain? That question reaches into some of the oldest debates in philosophy and science. The answer depends on how you define mind, how you define brain, and how you think about consciousness, identity, and experience. At its core, it's a question about what we are and what kind of thing thought really is. The brain is physical. You can touch it, scan it, measure it. It weighs about 3 pounds and runs on blood and electricity. It has parts, regions, chemicals, and circuits. Neuroscience maps how different parts of the brain handle different tasks: speech, movement, memory, vision, emotion. We know that when you damage part of the brain, the related function changes or disappears. If someone has a stroke in the left hemisphere, they may lose the ability to speak. If the hippocampus is injured, memory formation suffers. If you take drugs that affect neurotransmitters, mood, and behavior shift. From this view, the mind is what the brain does. The mind is not a separate thing, but the name we give to the activity of the brain. When neurons fire in a certain pattern, you feel happy. When they fire differently, you feel sad. Everything you think, feel, remember, or imagine is rooted in those patterns. This is called physicalism, or materialism. It holds that mental states are brain states. There's no ghost in the machine, just the machine doing what machines do. This view is supported by a lot of evidence. Brain scans show mental activity tied to physical regions. Electrical stimulation of the brain can trigger memories, thoughts, or emotions. Anesthesia shuts off consciousness. Sleep, trauma, and illness can change awareness. All these facts suggest that the mind and the brain are tightly linked, perhaps inseparably so. But some people argue the opposite. They say the mind can't be reduced to brain activity. Just because mental states correlate with brain states doesn't mean they are brain states. Correlation isn't identity. When you see a fire and feel heat, those things happen together, but the fire isn't the same as the feeling of warmth. In the same way, the brain might generate conditions for the mind, but the mind might be something else, something more. This idea is called dualism, most famously argued by René Descartes. He believed the mind was a separate substance, a thinking thing, not made of matter. The body, including the brain, could be touched and measured, but the mind had no shape or size. It was private, internal, and fundamentally different. In this view, you're not your brain, you're your mind, a self that uses the brain but isn't the brain. One reason people hold this view is consciousness. You can observe neurons and electrical impulses, but you can't observe a thought the way someone experiences it. You can see brain activity when someone tastes chocolate, but you can't feel what they feel just by looking at the scan. That inner first-person experience is called qualia. It's what it feels like to be you, and that what it feels like doesn't seem to show up in physical data. This leads to what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. How does matter produce experience? How does a lump of tissue create pain, joy, longing, or self-awareness? You can explain how signals move and how behavior follows, but explaining how it feels to be alive is harder. No one has yet bridged that gap. Some people use this to argue that the mind must be something else, maybe a non-physical field, a soul, or a level of reality we don't yet understand. They point to cases like near-death experiences, out-of-body reports, or sudden insights that seem to arrive from nowhere. These stories aren't hard proof, but they suggest that people experience something they interpret as beyond the brain. Another approach is property dualism. It says there's only one substance, matter, but it has two kinds of properties. The brain has physical properties like shape and weight, but it also has mental properties, consciousness, thought, will. These can't be seen from the outside. They emerge when matter is organized in a certain way. So the mind isn't a separate thing, but it's also not reducible to mechanics. It's a higher level phenomenon. This is like how water has properties that hydrogen and oxygen alone don't have. Neither gas is wet, but combined in the right structure, they form a liquid. Similarly, neurons may not think by themselves, but in large networks they create thought. The mind could be an emergent property of the brain, real, but not separate. Others propose a middle path called functionalism. They say the mind is the pattern of activity, not the material. So if you could replicate the brain's structure and function in another medium, like a computer, you'd also replicate the mind. This is the basis for many ideas about artificial intelligence and mind uploading. If your mind is just how your brain processes information, then in theory, it could run on other hardware. But again, this raises the question, is the mind really just information processing? Or is there something essential about living tissue, or experience, or embodiment? Some argue that thought isn't just data, it's rooted in the body, the senses, the environment. That means you can't separate the mind from the whole human being. The mind is not a floating code, it's a lived process. Others suggest we framed the question wrong. Asking whether the mind is separate assumes a kind of spatial or material comparison, but the mind might be a different kind of thing altogether, like a process, a relation, or a dynamic. Fire isn't separate from the logs that burn, but it's also not identical to the logs. It's what happens when they interact in a certain way. The mind could be like that. a process that arises when the brain works in the right conditions. Still, even if we accept the mind is tied to the brain, it doesn't mean the two are identical. We can't fully define the mind by scanning the brain. The same brain state might support different thoughts in different people. The brain is necessary, but maybe not sufficient. Just like a piano is necessary for a piano concert, but having the instrument doesn't guarantee music. In everyday life, we treat the mind as something real. We blame people, forgive them, ask what they think, wonder how they feel. We don't talk about neural pathways and synaptic firing. We talk about motives, dreams, regrets, hopes. We treat each other as minds, not just brains. That makes sense because mind is the level where life is lived. So is the mind separate from the brain? That depends on what you mean by separate. If you mean disconnected, probably not. If you mean different in kind, maybe. If you mean reducible, still uncertain. We know the brain matters, but we also know the mind is more than a collection of parts. It's the experience of being, knowing, remembering, choosing. And that mystery isn't solved yet. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? That question is old and people still debate it. Not because they're confused about trees or forests, but because it asks something deeper. What is sound? And does the world exist the same way whether or not it's being observed? Let's begin with the physical part. When a tree falls, it moves through the air. Its trunk and branches hit the ground. That movement creates vibrations. Those vibrations travel through the air as pressure waves. The waves ripple outward in all directions. If there's a person nearby with working ears, those waves enter the ear canal, strike the eardrum, and get turned into electrical signals in the brain. That's what we call hearing. So from a scientific standpoint, yes, the tree makes a sound because it creates air pressure waves, and that's what sound is in physical terms. But that's not the only definition. Some people say sound isn't just waves. It's the experience of hearing. It's not just movement in the air. It's what happens in a conscious mind. If no one is there to receive the vibrations, then there is no sound in the way we usually mean it. The actual experience of hearing something. In that sense, no, the tree doesn't make a sound, because sound, by that definition, needs a listener. Both definitions are correct depending on how you frame the question. In one view, sound is a mechanical event. In the other, it's a psychological event. The disagreement isn't about trees, it's about how language works and how we define reality. If you define sound as vibration, it happens whether anyone hears it. If you define sound as perception, it only happens when someone is there. This leads to a bigger question. Does reality require an observer? Some philosophers say yes. Idealists like George Berkeley argue that physical objects only exist because they are perceived. In his view, to be is to be perceived. If no mind is watching, the world isn't truly there in the way we think. In that case, if no one hears the tree, not only is there no sound, there may be no tree at all. That view seems strange today, but quantum physics brings a similar puzzle. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently when observed. For example, in the famous double-slit experiment, particles act like waves when unmeasured, but like particles when measured. That suggests observation changes outcomes. Some people take this to mean consciousness affects reality, that without an observer, certain events don't resolve into facts. But that's a controversial interpretation. Many physicists argue that observation in quantum mechanics doesn't require a human mind. It just means interaction with a measuring device. Still, the idea that observation plays a role in shaping events makes the tree question feel less silly. If some part of nature depends on being observed to take form, maybe we shouldn't be so quick to separate experience from reality. Maybe the two are more tangled than we think. We also have to look at how the mind processes reality. Human beings don't experience the world directly. We experience signals. Light hits our eyes, sound hits our ears, chemicals hit our nose. Our brain turns all this into a model of the world. That model feels solid and real, but it's constructed. It's based on data filtered through senses, processed by neurons. If sound needs a brain to interpret it, then the falling tree doesn't make sound, it makes potential sound. The sound only comes into being when a mind makes sense of it. But what about non-human ears? Maybe no people are in the forest, but birds are, or deer, or insects. All of them can detect vibrations. All of them might hear the tree fall. So the question becomes, does the absence of humans mean the absence of sound? If other creatures are around and they react to the fall, does that count? If we say no, then we're saying that only human observation gives reality its shape. That view feels narrow, even arrogant. The tree doesn't care who hears it. It falls. It moves air. It hits the ground. Things happen. Whether or not a human is present seems irrelevant from nature's point of view. But from the philosophical point of view, it's not irrelevant. It reminds us that we can't step outside our own perception. When we ask, did it make a sound? We're really asking, can we know anything exists without our experience of it? And the answer isn't simple. Imagine a tape recorder in the forest. You leave it there, and it records the tree falling. You come back the next day and listen to the sound. Did the sound exist when the tree fell, or only when you played it back? The tape captured the vibrations. It didn't hear anything, but it proves the waves were real. Still, you didn't hear the sound until later. So the experience of the sound came after the event. That gap shows the difference between the physical event and the mental one. Now imagine no recorder, no animals, just the tree, it falls, the forest goes on. Did sound happen? If you believe in an objective reality, yes. If you believe the world only exists through perception, maybe not. But either way, you're revealing your view about what counts as real, material facts or conscious experience. Even in everyday life, this matters. Is a work of art beautiful if no one sees it? Is a joke funny if no one hears it? Is kindness real if no one notices? These aren't about trees, but they reflect the same issue. What gives value, presence, or truth to something? The thing itself, or the fact that someone witnesses it? We act as if reality exists independently. We build machines, predict weather, launch satellites. None of that works if the world depends entirely on being observed. But at the same time, we only know the world through experience, so we're always walking a line. There's a world out there, but the only world we ever know is the one shaped inside our mind. The tree question also reminds us that language can blur meaning. Words like sound carry hidden assumptions. Are we talking about waves or hearing? Are we talking about matter or mind? When the question seems confusing, it's often because the terms are unclear. Once we break them down, the confusion lifts. So when a tree falls with no one around, what happens? The air moves, energy is released. If you define sound as vibration, then yes, sound happens. If you define sound as conscious hearing, then no, sound does not happen. Both views are defensible. The question forces us to face the limits of our knowledge and the boundary between the world and our awareness of it. The real point may not be about trees or forests, it's about how we relate to truth. Do we think truth is out there, waiting to be discovered? Or do we think it's something we co-create through experience? Either way, the question keeps echoing, like sound waves rippling through a forest that may or may not be heard. Would the world be better off without humans? That depends on what you mean by better off. If you mean cleaner, quieter, and more ecologically balanced, the answer leans yes. If you mean richer in meaning, creativity, and consciousness, the answer leans no. The question isn't just about the environment, it's about what kind of value you think matters most, biological stability or human presence. Start with the planet itself. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Life has been around for over 3 billion years. For almost all of that time, humans didn't exist. Forests grew, rivers flowed, animals hunted and nested and died. Ecosystems came and went. Species evolved and vanished. Volcanoes erupted, glaciers advanced and retreated. The Earth didn't need us to function. It operated by its own logic. Cycles of energy, food chains, climate shifts. Then came humans. In a short time, we changed the planet more than most species ever have. We cut down forests, dammed rivers, mined mountains, and burned fossil fuels. We built cities, made tools, tamed fire, and invented agriculture. In doing so, we altered the land, the sea, and the sky. Carbon levels rose, temperatures climbed, species vanished at record rates, coral reefs bleached, oceans acidified, ice caps melted. If you take a narrow ecological view, this looks like damage. Many scientists call the current age the Anthropocene, a period defined by human impact. By this measure, the world would be more balanced without us. Forests would regrow, air and water would clear, animal populations might stabilize, climate systems could return to natural rhythms, there would be less extinction, less pollution, less disruption. We've seen examples of this when human activity stops. After the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the exclusion zone became a wildlife haven. Wolves, bears, and wild horses now roam where people once lived. During the early months of COVID-19 lockdowns, satellite images showed reduced air pollution over major cities. Clear skies and quiet streets gave a glimpse of what a world without us might look like. Nature reclaims space when we leave it alone, but that picture only tells part of the story. Yes, humans cause harm, but we also create things no other species can. We make art, we compose music, we write books, build temples, design languages, tell stories and ask questions. We study the stars and dig into the past. We try to understand life, death, and everything in between. That mental life, that inner world, is something no river or forest produces on its own. The natural world is rich in beauty, but it's not moral. Lions kill prey without remorse. Forest fires destroy without pity. Diseases spread without mercy. Nature is full of suffering, struggle, and indifference. It doesn't care if creatures live or die. It just continues. Humans introduced a different kind of awareness, one that can reflect on pain, that can feel empathy, that can act on behalf of others. No ecosystem has ever tried to stop cruelty, but humans have. Not always, not enough, but the capacity exists. We created medicine. We fought to end slavery. We built shelters for the homeless. We sent aid to strangers. We protected endangered species. We invented human rights. These things don't balance out the destruction, but they show the other side of what we are. We're not just builders of machines and burners of coal. We're also dreamers, mourners, caretakers. We're flawed, but not empty. Some people say that without humans, the Earth would be fine. That's true, but fine doesn't mean full. A world without humans would be quieter, but it would also lack reflection. It would go on, but no one would know what it means to be alive. No one would write poems or paint sunsets or hold hands at the edge of death. The Earth would spin, but it would do so without witness. There's also the question of responsibility. We caused much of the damage we see. If we disappeared, the problems wouldn't vanish instantly. Plastic would stay in the oceans, nuclear waste would linger, buildings would decay, climate shifts might take centuries to stabilize, some ecosystems might not recover at all. Extinction is permanent. So is that our legacy? A damaged planet left to clean up after us? Or is there a better path? We're the only species that can choose how it lives on Earth. Other animals follow instinct. We can follow ethics. We can look at our impact and try to change it. That doesn't mean we're doing enough, but it means we can. We can replant forests. We can rebuild reefs. We can reduce emissions. We can protect habitats. These actions won't erase the past, but they can shape the future. A world without humans would be simpler, but simpler isn't always better. Life is full of tension, harmony and conflict, beauty and waste, generosity and greed. We carry all of it. That complexity is hard to manage, but it's also what makes us human. To say the world would be better without us may be true in one sense, but it misses the depth of the question. Better for whom, and by what measure? If you measure by biodiversity, then yes, our absence might help. If you measure by the richness of meaning, then our presence matters. We're not just another species. We're the only ones who ask why we exist. We're the only ones who can look at the stars and wonder. We're the only ones who grieve, not just for kin, but for strangers and even animals. We cause harm, but we also heal. We destroy, but we also preserve. The question isn't just whether the world would be better without us. It's whether we can become the kind of species that makes the world better with us in it. That's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility, and that possibility means something. Is anything truly random, or is everything predetermined? That question sits at the heart of how we think about the universe, free will and cause and effect. Some people believe that every event has a cause, even if we don't understand it. Others argue that some things happen without reason, not because the cause is hidden, but because there is no cause at all. To answer this, we have to look at physics, probability, biology, and philosophy. Start with classical physics. In Newton's world, everything follows laws. If you know the position and speed of every particle, and you know the laws of motion, you can calculate what will happen next. Every movement has a cause. Every effect follows from something else. That kind of system is called deterministic. In a deterministic universe, randomness is just ignorance. If you roll a die and don't know what number it will land on, it's not because the result is random. It's because you don't know the exact angle, force, friction, and bounce. In theory, if you knew all those things, you could predict the outcome perfectly. This idea held for centuries. It worked for planets, pendulums, and falling apples. It suggested that the universe was a great machine, complex, but fully ordered. That view began to shift in the early 20th century with the rise of quantum mechanics. Quantum physics describes the behavior of particles at the smallest scales: atoms, electrons, photons. In this realm, certainty breaks down. You can't know both the position and the momentum of a particle at the same time. That's not because of a flaw in our tools. It's built into how the universe works. This is called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Even stranger is quantum indeterminacy. Some events, like radioactive decay, happen without a specific cause. You can measure the probability that a uranium atom will decay in a given time, but you can't predict exactly when any single atom will do it. That behavior appears random, not just hard to predict, impossible to predict. Even if you had perfect information, you still wouldn't know. There's no hidden mechanism that determines the outcome in advance, at least not one we found. This led many scientists to conclude that the universe is not entirely deterministic. At the quantum level, randomness is real, but others disagree. They think the randomness is only apparent. Maybe hidden variables exist, factors we haven't discovered yet, that control the outcomes behind the scenes. Einstein believed this. He famously said, "God does not play dice." He thought that the universe had rules we just hadn't grasped, but so far experiments haven't supported the hidden variable idea. Instead, they've reinforced the idea that some events really don't have a determined cause. Still, just because quantum events are random doesn't mean the whole universe is random. At larger scales, like people, trees, or planets, things behave in predictable ways. That's because quantum randomness averages out. If a few atoms behave unpredictably, it doesn't matter much to the path of a football or the orbit of the moon. Classical laws still work well in most situations, so we get a layered view of the universe. At the bottom, some things might be truly random. At higher levels, patterns emerge. Those patterns follow laws and causes. Your heart beats, water boils, gravity pulls. These things aren't random. They happen in reliable, repeatable ways. That's why science works. If everything were random, there would be no patterns to study. But what about human behaviour? Are our choices random or determined? If you choose to eat cereal instead of eggs, was that decision caused by something, or did it just happen? Neuroscience suggests that the brain operates through physical processes. Neurons fire, chemicals flow, signals pass through circuits shaped by memory, habit, and mood. These processes follow rules. If that's true, your choice of breakfast may be determined by your brain's state, just like the orbit of a planet is determined by gravity. Some experiments have found that brain activity related to a decision can be detected before a person becomes aware of making the decision. That suggests the brain may decide before the mind knows it. If that holds, it challenges the idea of free will. It suggests we're not choosing freely, but just following internal causes. But others argue that free will doesn't require randomness. A choice can be caused and still be free if it comes from your values, goals, and reasons. If you act based on who you are, not on outside pressure or random chance, that's still meaningful. In that view, freedom is about acting in line with yourself, not about breaking free from causality. So where does randomness fit in? It may exist, but it doesn't explain freedom. A random event isn't a choice. If your decision is caused by a coin flip in your brain, that's not more free, it's just unpredictable. Meaningful freedom might lie between strict determinism and total randomness. It might be the ability to respond to situations with flexibility, shaped by memory, emotion, and reflection. You also have systems that are deterministic but unpredictable. These are chaotic systems. The weather is one. Small differences in starting conditions create huge differences later. That's why weather forecasts break down after a few days. The system follows laws, but it's too sensitive to measure exactly. It looks random, but it's not. It's just complex. Your brain might be like that too. Not random, but chaotic. That could explain why people are so hard to predict. Then there's probability. We use it to describe situations with many outcomes. Games of chance, genetics, economic models, all use probability. But is probability about real randomness or just our lack of knowledge? Some argue it's epistemic, about what we know. Others think it's ontological, about what actually happens in the world. If you flip a coin, is the outcome truly undetermined, or do you just not know enough to call it? In practice, we treat randomness as real. We use it in encryption, in science, in statistics. We build systems that rely on it. Even if it's just ignorance, it behaves like randomness. But at the deepest level, the question remains open. So is anything truly random? At the quantum level, it appears so. Is everything predetermined? Not in the strict Newtonian sense. The universe allows room for unpredictability. But most events in everyday life follow patterns, causes, and consequences. Randomness is part of the picture, but it's not the whole frame. The balance between chaos and order, between chance and cause, is what makes the world work. Too much randomness and nothing holds. Too much determinism and nothing changes. Somewhere in the middle, life happens. That's where we live. Between rules and surprises, between patterns and choices, between what we know and what we can't predict. Why do we dream? That question has no single answer. Scientists, psychologists, and philosophers have given many explanations, but none explain every aspect of dreaming. Some say it's just the brain firing randomly during sleep. Others say dreams help process emotions or solve problems. Some see dreams as leftovers of the day. Others say they reflect unconscious desires. What's clear is that dreaming is universal. Everyone dreams. You may not remember your dreams, but the brain still creates them. Most dreams happen during a stage of sleep called REM, short for rapid eye movement. In REM sleep, the brain becomes active. Blood flow increases. Neurons fire. The body stays still, but the mind lights up. During this stage, we often experience vivid, emotional, and sometimes bizarre dreams, but REM isn't the only time we dream. Lighter dreams can happen in non-REM sleep too. though they tend to be less visual and less emotional. One explanation is that dreams are a side effect of brain maintenance. While we sleep, the brain sorts through the day's experiences. It trims unneeded connections and strengthens important ones. This process, called memory consolidation, helps store long-term memories and clear mental clutter. In this view, dreams may be part of that process, fragments of memories, thoughts, and emotions being organised and filed away. Dreams feel strange because the brain isn't focused on external input. Instead, it's pulling from internal images, sounds, and feelings, often without clear logic. Another view sees dreams as a kind of emotional processing. The brain relives feelings, especially strong ones, to help reduce emotional stress. For example, if something frightened you during the day, your dream might replay that fear in a symbolic way. You may dream of falling, being chased, or losing something important. The dream allows you to feel through the experience again, but in a safe environment. Over time, this helps blunt the emotional charge. Some researchers believe this helps with emotional regulation. Dreams let us revisit problems without being overwhelmed. Some dreams go further. They seem to offer solutions or insights. People sometimes wake from a dream with a new idea or a sense of clarity. This has happened in science, music, and art. The chemist Auguste Kekulé dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, which helped him understand the circular structure of the benzene molecule. Paul McCartney once said he dreamed the melody to Yesterday. In these cases, the dreaming brain seems to make connections that the waking brain couldn't. That might be because the dreaming brain is freer. It's not bound by the usual rules, logical filters are loosened. The mind wanders through odd combinations and strange juxtapositions. This randomness isn't useless, it may be creative. By breaking patterns, the brain finds new ones. That could explain why dreams sometimes feel meaningful, even if they are hard to describe. Freud thought dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. He believed they showed hidden desires, usually ones we don't admit to ourselves. In Freud's theory, dreams disguise those desires using symbols. A house might represent the body, a journey might mean sex, a dream's content, what you remember, is the manifest dream. The hidden meaning underneath is the latent dream. Freud thought understanding dreams could help uncover repressed feelings and unresolved conflicts. Not everyone agrees. Freud's methods are hard to test, his symbols are often vague. Still, the idea that dreams carry psychological meaning stuck. Later theorists like Carl Jung expanded on it. Jung believed dreams came from a deeper layer of the psyche, the collective unconscious. He thought dreams spoke in archetypes, universal images like the hero, the mother, the shadow. In his view, dreams didn't just reflect personal feelings. They pointed towards spiritual growth and wholeness. Today, most scientists take a more cautious approach. They focus on what the brain does during sleep. One idea is called the activation synthesis theory. It sees the brainstem creates random signals during REM sleep. The brain, always trying to make sense of things, turns those signals into a story. That story is the dream. In this view, dreams don't have deep meaning. They're just mental noise made into a movie. You might dream of a flying cat not because it means something, but because the visual system got triggered by chance and your brain invented a reason. But even if dreams are built from randomness, they may still reflect something real. Think of a painting made from spilled paint. The process may start by accident, but the artist can still find meaning in the shapes. Your brain may do something similar, making a story from random pieces, then reacting to that story as if it were real. That reaction can matter, especially if the dream makes you feel something powerful. Some dreams are repetitive. People report dreaming about being late, falling, being unprepared for a test, or losing teeth. These are common across cultures. They suggest shared anxieties or pressures. Such dreams may not be symbolic in the strict sense, but they reflect recurring concerns. They show what's on the mind, fears of failure, change, loss of control. Then there are nightmares. These intense, disturbing dreams can leave lasting impressions. They often come after trauma. In PTSD, people relive painful experiences in dreams. The images may repeat night after night. Some researchers believe this is the brain's way of trying to integrate the trauma, facing the memory until it becomes manageable. But the process can be overwhelming. In such cases, therapy may be needed to help process the dream and its meaning. Lucid dreams are another kind. In a lucid dream, you know you're dreaming while it's happening. Sometimes you can even control the dream. This happens when part of the brain responsible for self-awareness stays active during REM sleep. Lucid dreaming raises questions about consciousness. How much awareness can the brain have while asleep? Can you train yourself to control dreams? Some people practice techniques like reality checks or dream journaling to increase the chance of lucidity. Children dream differently from adults. Their dreams tend to be simpler, more about movement, animals, or colours. As the brain matures, dreams become more complex with characters, plots, and emotional themes. This suggests that dreaming reflects brain development. It also shows how dreams change as we grow. What frightens or delights us at 5 may not be the same at 15 or 50. Technology is starting to give us tools to study dreams more closely. Brain scans can show which areas are active during sleep. AI tools can analyze dream reports to find patterns. Some researchers are working on ways to communicate with people while they dream, asking questions and getting simple responses through eye movement or muscle twitches. We're still far from reading dreams directly, but we're getting closer to mapping the mind during sleep. So why do we dream? Maybe for memory, maybe for emotion, maybe for creativity, maybe for no reason at all. The brain does many things we don't fully understand, but dreaming, whatever its function, remains a core part of being human. It shows the mind working even when we're still. It reveals what we feel, what we fear, and what we imagine. It reminds us that not all thinking happens in daylight. Some of it happens in the dark, and if everything has a cause, what caused the first cause? That question leads to one of the oldest problems in philosophy and theology. It's simple to ask, but hard to answer. It touches on logic, time, cosmology, and the limits of explanation itself. When you follow a chain of events backward, looking for causes, you eventually run into a wall. At some point you have to ask, where did it all begin, and what set it in motion? Causality means that things happen for reasons. A tree grows because a seed was planted. A fire burns because someone struck a match. A planet moves because gravity pulls it. Each event follows another. This chain of causes and effects forms the structure of how we understand the world. Science, history, and everyday reasoning rely on it. But if every event is caused by a prior one, then logic demands that the chain must go back forever, or start somewhere. Both options are troubling. If the chain goes back forever, it never begins. That's called an infinite regress. Imagine lining up dominoes. Each domino falls because one before it pushed it, but if there's no first domino, nothing ever starts falling. An infinite chain of causes means no moment ever truly begins. That contradicts our experience. Things happen, events start. So most thinkers reject infinite regress as a full answer. It postpones the explanation but never delivers it. So maybe the chain does have a beginning. That leads to the idea of a first cause, an event or thing that started everything else, but wasn't itself caused by anything. That sounds strange, because it breaks the rule that everything needs a cause. But if you don't allow at least one exception, you're stuck with no starting point. So some argue that something must exist without a cause, a necessary being, a self-starting reality, or an uncaused cause. This is the core of the cosmological argument, one of the traditional arguments for the existence of God. Thinkers like Aristotle, Aquinas, and others said that the universe must have a first cause, and that cause must lie outside the chain of natural events. For Aristotle, it was the unmoved mover. For Aquinas, it was God, a being whose nature is to exist and who doesn't need a cause. In this view, everything else depends on this first cause, but the first cause depends on nothing. But that explanation raises its own problems. If you say God caused the universe, the next question is, who or what caused God? If you say nothing caused God, then you've made an exception to the rule that everything needs a cause. And if one thing can exist without a cause, why not the universe itself? Why not say the Big Bang just happened, without needing an outside trigger? That's one argument from some physicists and philosophers. They say the universe could be the first cause. Maybe the laws of physics allowed the universe to arise from a quantum vacuum, a state with no matter, but with energy and rules. In quantum mechanics, particles can appear and disappear in what's called vacuum fluctuations. Some theorists suggest that the entire universe could have begun as such a fluctuation. If that's possible, then perhaps the universe caused itself. No outside creator needed. But then you ask, where did the laws of physics come from? Why is there something instead of nothing? Why is there even a quantum vacuum to fluctuate? Those questions dig deeper than physics usually goes. At some point, scientific explanation hits a wall. It can describe how events unfold after the beginning, but not what made the beginning possible in the first place. Some say we need to adjust how we think about causality. Our concept of cause and effect works well inside the universe, but maybe it breaks down at the very beginning, if there even was a beginning. Time, space, matter and energy all emerged from the Big Bang. Before that, there may have been no time at all, and if time didn't exist, maybe before is the wrong word. In that case, asking what caused the first cause might be like asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a question built on a faulty assumption. This is where logic starts to stretch. Maybe the first cause didn't happen in time. Maybe it created time. If so, we can't ask what came before it. Cause and effect, as we know it, depends on time flowing. Without time, causality has no direction. That makes the idea of a first cause even harder to grasp. It may be outside the framework we use to make sense of everything else. Some philosophers try to dodge the whole issue by rethinking existence. They say the question, what caused the first cause, assumes that things have to come from something. But maybe existence is just a brute fact. Maybe reality just is. That's hard to accept because the mind craves explanation. We want reasons, but not everything may offer one. Some truths might be foundational, not because they explain, but because they are what explanations stand on. Others look at this from a different angle. Maybe the universe is cyclic. Maybe there was no beginning. Some cosmological models suggest that the universe expands, contracts, and then starts again, an eternal loop. In this view, the chain of cause and effect never ends, but it circles back on itself. The past isn't infinitely long in a straight line. It's more like a wheel turning forever. That avoids the need for a first cause, but it raises questions about how and why the cycle exists. There's also a psychological angle. Our brains are built to look for causes. That's how we survive. If you hear a noise in the dark, you assume something caused it. If a plant dies, you look for what went wrong. This habit of seeking causes helps us understand the world, but it may not apply to everything, especially not to questions outside space and time. The desire for a first cause might reflect the structure of our mind more than the structure of reality. Still, the question doesn't go away. Even if we accept that the universe began, and even if we allow that something uncaused started it, we're left with mystery. What kind of thing exists without a cause? What does it mean for something to be necessary? These aren't just scientific or logical puzzles, they're existential ones. They ask us to confront the limits of understanding and the shape of the unknown. So we stand at the edge of what we can know. We follow the chain of causes as far back as we can. Then we face a choice. Either accept a stopping point or keep pushing past it into speculation. Some find that answer in God. Others find it in physics. Others admit they don't know. and maybe can't know. But the question still matters, not just because it's hard, but because it shows us something about ourselves. We ask it not because we see the answer, but because we feel the need to look. That search, restless, persistent, unfinished, is one of the most human things there is. Do parallel universes exist? That question moves between science and speculation. It asks whether reality is bigger than what we can see or test. It sounds like science fiction, but serious physicists have explored it. Some even say it follows from what we already know. But no one has found direct evidence, and there may be no way to test the idea. That makes it a bold theory, one with deep possibilities and clear limits. Start with what we mean by parallel universes. The phrase can mean different things in different theories. It might mean other regions of space with their own stars and galaxies. It might mean other versions of Earth, with slightly different histories. It might mean worlds that split off every time a choice is made. Or it might mean other realities with different physical laws altogether. Not every version is equal. Some come from solid physics, others are more speculative. One reason people talk about parallel universes is because of inflation theory and cosmology. According to this theory, the early universe expanded at an incredible rate, much faster than the speed of light. This rapid expansion, called cosmic inflation, helped explain why the universe looks so uniform on large scales. But inflation might not have happened just once. Some models say it keeps happening in other regions, even today. Each bubble where inflation slows down becomes a universe with its own properties. This is called eternal inflation. If this model is right, our universe might be one bubble in a vast foam of universes. These bubbles would be far apart, so far that we could never reach or observe them. Each could have different values for the basic constants, like gravity, electromagnetism, or the mass of particles. Some of these universes might be too chaotic for life. Others might be empty. Ours happens to be one where conditions support stars, planets, and life. In that view, we're not special. We're just in the kind of universe where observers can exist. Another argument comes from quantum mechanics. In quantum theory, particles can exist in many states at once. This is called superposition. But when we measure them, they seem to collapse into a single state. The most famous example is Schrödinger's cat, a thought experiment where a cat in a box is both alive and dead until you look inside. But why does observation make the system choose one outcome? The many worlds interpretation offers a radical answer. It says the wave function never collapses. Instead, every possible outcome happens, but in a separate branch of reality. Open the box, and in one universe, the cat is alive. In another, it's dead. You split along with the result. Every time a quantum event has multiple outcomes, the universe splits. This means that countless versions of you exist, each living out a different path. This idea avoids some problems in quantum theory. It treats the math consistently and removes the need for a special collapse process. But it leads to a staggering picture. Every decision, every coin toss, every quantum event creates a fork in reality. The universe becomes a constantly branching tree. Most branches will never affect each other. They are parallel and independent, but they are all part of the same total structure, the multiverse. Then there's the idea from string theory and higher dimensions. String theory tries to unify all the forces of nature. To do this, it needs more dimensions than we see, usually 10 or 11. Most of these extra dimensions are curled up so small we can't detect them. But in some models, these dimensions allow for multiple universes. Brain theory, for example, says our universe is a three-dimensional brain floating in a higher dimensional space. Other brains could exist nearby, with their own matter and physics. They might bump into ours. Some people think this could explain the Big Bang, as a collision between brains. These models are mathematical. They come from efforts to build a theory of everything, but they don't predict anything we can test easily. That's a problem. In science, a good theory makes predictions that can be checked. If we can't see or measure other universes, how can we know they're real? Some say we should treat the multiverse like atoms were treated in the 19th century. Back then, atoms were a useful idea, but no one had seen one. The idea explained chemical behaviour, so scientists used it. Eventually, we built tools to detect atoms. Maybe the same will happen with parallel universes. If the math works, and the theory explains more than it costs, maybe we accept it, even without direct evidence. Others push back. They say a theory you can't test isn't really science. It might be philosophy or math, but it's not physics unless it makes contact with experiment. If parallel universes leave no trace, how can we know they exist? Some versions of the multiverse may be unfalsifiable. That doesn't make them wrong, but it puts them in a different category. There are also logical concerns. If everything that can happen does happen in some universe, how do we talk about probability? If you win the lottery in one world and lose in another, what does likely mean? If every outcome exists, does choice matter? Some argue that many worlds theory makes free will meaningless. Others say it's no worse than what we already believe about fate or chance. Cultural versions of parallel universes show up in stories. Alternate histories, mirror worlds, time loops, all use the idea. These stories let us ask, what if? What if you had chosen differently? What if history had changed? These questions matter because they point to contingency. They remind us that life isn't fixed. The world could be different. That thought shapes how we think about regret, possibility, and fate. But stories aren't evidence. They show what the idea means emotionally. They don't prove it. The scientific versions of the multiverse don't let you visit your other selves. You can't hop between timelines. If other universes exist, they're probably unreachable. That's part of what makes the idea so strange. It might be true, but always out of reach. Still, the concept forces us to rethink what we mean by reality. We used to think the Earth was the centre, then the Sun, then the galaxy. Now we wonder if the universe itself is just one among many. If that's true, our place is even smaller, but perhaps more meaningful. We're in a universe that lets us ask the question. That alone is rare. So do parallel universes exist? Maybe. The math says they might. The physics allows it. But we don't know, and we may never know for sure. What we do know is that the idea changes how we think. It shows that reality may be bigger than we imagine, and that even the most familiar world may be just one version among many. Is there such a thing as objective morality? That question asks whether some actions are right or wrong no matter what anyone thinks. It means looking for a moral truth that doesn't change based on opinion, culture, religion, or power. Objective morality would be like a law of nature, real, stable, and binding for everyone. The opposite view is that morality is subjective, shaped by personal beliefs, social norms, or emotional reactions. If morality is subjective, then right and wrong change depending on where you are, who you are, or what you believe. To see the difference, take a simple case. Is it wrong to torture a child for fun? Most people would say yes, always. They don't need a law, religion, or cultural rule to tell them that. It feels obviously wrong. Even people who disagree about almost everything else will agree that this action is evil. If anything counts as objectively wrong, this does. But that's only one example. Once you move to more complex moral questions, abortion, war, capital punishment, lying to protect someone, things get harder. People disagree. Cultures differ. What one group sees as moral, another may see as evil. That's why it's so hard to prove that morality is objective. Some people argue that objective morality comes from God. This view is common in religious traditions. In Christianity, for example, God's nature is seen as the source of moral law. In Islam, God reveals moral rules through the Quran. In Judaism, the Torah defines moral obligations. If morality comes from God, then it isn't just opinion, it's fixed and universal. Killing, stealing, lying. these are wrong because they go against divine command. If a divine being is perfectly good and perfectly just, then its will defines what good is. In this view, morality is not made by people, it's discovered through revelation. But that view depends on belief in God, and not everyone shares that belief. Even among the religious, different groups follow different moral codes. Some allow polygamy, others ban it. Some forbid eating pork or drinking alcohol, others do not. Some allow just war, others call all violence wrong. So even divine morality seems to come in many versions. And then there's the Euthyphro dilemma. Is something good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it is good? If the first is true, then morality is based only on authority. Whatever God says goes. But if the second is true, then goodness exists independently of God. In that case, morality is objective, but God is not the source. Some philosophers have tried to build objective morality without religion. Immanuel Kant said morality comes from reason. His key idea was the categorical imperative. That means acting in a way that your action could be a universal law. If it's wrong for one person to lie, then it must be wrong for everyone to lie. You can't make yourself an exception. For Kant, morality is not about feelings or outcomes, it's about duty and consistency. A moral law is objective because it doesn't depend on desire or culture, it comes from rational thought. But Kant's system has limits. It doesn't tell you what to do in cases where duties clash. Should you lie to save a life? Kant said no. But most people think saving a life matters more than telling the truth, so reason alone might not settle every moral question. Others, like utilitarians, say morality is about outcomes, and action is right if it brings more happiness or reduces suffering. That seems simple and practical. You can measure well-being, you can compare options. Saving 5 lives is better than saving 1, but this too has problems. What if making one person suffer leads to more happiness for many others? Is that fair? What if people value freedom more than pleasure? Utilitarianism tries to be objective by using measurable effects, but it still depends on what values you count. Pleasure, safety, freedom, dignity, and those aren't always easy to balance. Evolutionary theory offers another answer. It says morality developed as a survival tool. Early humans lived in groups. Cooperation helped them hunt, protect each other, and raise children. Traits like empathy, fairness, and loyalty made groups stronger. Over time, these became moral instincts. So we feel guilt when we hurt others, pride when we help, anger when we're cheated. These feelings are not absolute truths. They're strategies for group survival. In this view, morality is real but not objective. It works, but only because evolution made it useful. Still, even if morality evolved, that doesn't mean it's fake. Eyes evolved, but light is real. Maybe moral instincts evolved because they respond to something real about how to treat others. Maybe fairness, harm, and care matter, not just because they help groups survive, but because they reflect deeper truths about well-being. If pain is real, then causing pain matters. If freedom is real, then denying freedom matters. That might not be objective in the strictest sense, but it's not random either. Then there's moral relativism. It says that all moral truths are shaped by culture. What's right in one place may be wrong in another. Child marriage, gender roles, eating meat, these vary across societies. Relativism warns against moral arrogance. It says we should not assume our values are better just because they're ours. But taken to the extreme, it leads to moral paralysis. If every culture is equally right, how can we judge genocide, slavery, or oppression? If morality is only cultural, then there's no reason to oppose evil done far away, or even next door. That feels wrong. So some philosophers suggest a middle path. Morality may not be fully objective like math, but it's also not just opinion. It might be based on human needs, things like food, safety, love, and dignity. If an action supports those needs, it's good. If it harms them, it's bad. These needs don't change much across cultures. That gives morality a stable base. You don't need a divine law or a perfect theory, just attention to what helps people live better lives. That leads to a practical kind of objectivity. You test moral claims by asking what they do. Does this rule protect the weak? Does this action reduce suffering? Does this system allow people to grow and connect? You don't need to agree on every value to make progress. You just need to see which actions lead to more trust, safety, and meaning, and which lead to fear, cruelty, or despair. So is there objective morality? Maybe not in a strict, timeless, absolute form, but maybe in a grounded, practical, and shared sense. Not floating in heaven, but rooted in life. Not carved in stone, but growing in soil. Not perfect, but real. Morality may be a way of answering the question, how should we live, knowing others live too? The answer may not be final, but the question is always worth asking. Can you ever really know someone else's experience? That question strikes at the limits of empathy, language, and awareness. We live surrounded by other people. We hear their words, see their actions, and notice their reactions. But we never step inside their minds. We guess what they feel. We imagine what they mean. But we don't know it the way they know it. Their pain, joy, fear, confusion, or hope, those things live inside them, not inside us. You might think, of course I can know someone else's experience. They told me how they felt. But language is not a direct window into consciousness. It's a tool, a powerful tool, but still a translation. People use the same word to describe different things. One person says they're tired and means they didn't sleep well. Another says they're tired and means they're broken down by life. Both use the same word, but the weight behind it is different. You can listen carefully. You can watch for tone, body language, hesitation. You can ask questions, remember their story, and care deeply. But what you receive is a version of their experience, not the experience itself. It's shaped by how they tell it, how they understand it, and what they leave out. They may not know exactly what they feel. They may hide parts of it, or they may lack the words. Some experiences don't reduce well to speech. Think about pain. Physical pain is a private event. If you break your arm, a doctor can take an X-ray, measure swelling, or watch your reaction. But they can't feel your pain. They can compare it to what other people report, but they don't know how intense it is for you. One person's sharp may be another's dull. Some cry at a paper cut, others stay silent through broken ribs. Even if you try to explain your pain, no one else can experience it from the inside. They can know that you're hurting, but they don't feel what you feel. The same goes for emotional pain. When someone says they're grieving, you might recall your own loss and think, I know how that feels, but you don't. You know how you felt. Their grief might be softer, deeper, sharper. It might come with guilt, relief, anger, or nothing at all. You can understand the shape of it. You can guess what it might involve, but you don't sit inside their mind with their memories, their beliefs, their fears. Even with someone close to you, someone you've known for years, there's a gap. They can be open. You can be attentive. Still, part of their inner world stays unknown. Maybe they've never put it into words. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they don't know how. Some feelings stay buried. Some experiences resist expression. Culture adds another layer. What it means to suffer, succeed, feel shame, or show love varies across time and place. A gesture that says respect in one culture might say fear in another. A silence that means comfort in one place might feel cold somewhere else. If you come from different backgrounds, you may misread each other without meaning to. You think you understand. But the meaning was shaped by a different history. There's also the problem of projection. When you try to understand someone else, your mind uses your own experience as a base. That makes sense. It's all you have. If someone says, I feel trapped, you imagine a time when you felt stuck. If someone says, I feel invisible, You remember a moment when you were ignored. That helps you relate, but it can also mislead. You may think you're connecting when you're really substituting your story for theirs. People sometimes say, "I know exactly how you feel," but that sentence often hides more than it reveals. It means well. It tries to comfort, but it shortcuts the truth. A more honest version might be, "I felt something that might be similar, but I don't know how you feel right now. I want to understand." That kind of honesty respects the distance between minds while still trying to bridge it. Art is one way we try to cross that distance. A poem, a painting, a piece of music. They try to capture a feeling or a view of the world. When you read a novel and feel what a character feels, that's a kind of entry into another life. But again, it's still through your mind. You interpret what the writer shows. You colour it with your reactions. You fill in the gaps. Art gets closer than pure explanation, but it still doesn't close the gap entirely. Empathy helps. It's the ability to feel with someone, to be moved by their emotions. It's what allows people to offer real comfort, care, or presence. But even empathy has limits. You can feel sadness with someone, but if they're terrified or traumatized in a way you've never been, you might not be able to meet them there. You can try, you can listen, you can stay. That matters, but it doesn't create shared experience. It creates shared presence. That's not the same, but it's still important. There are times when people do feel deeply known. A close friend, a parent, a partner, they might say, "You get me." That feeling comes from long attention, shared history, and emotional trust. But even then, no one knows everything. You don't always know yourself fully. You surprise yourself. You feel something and don't know why. You react and regret it. If you don't fully know your own experience, how can someone else? But that doesn't mean the effort is useless. The fact that you can't fully know someone's experience doesn't mean you can't know anything. You can understand parts. You can hear and believe them. You can offer space, kindness, time. You can ask questions that invite depth. You can respect what you can't grasp. That's the work of connection. Not erasing the distance between minds, but building a bridge across it. Fragile, incomplete, but real. Some people fear being alone in their minds. Others find freedom in it. Either way, the boundary between selves is part of what makes connection powerful. When someone chooses to share a piece of their world, they're letting you into something private. That trust is a gift. You won't know exactly what it's like, but you can honour it. You can say, "I don't know how that feels, but I'm here, and I want to hear more." So no, you can't fully know someone else's experience, but that's not failure. That's just how minds work, and within those limits, there's still room for understanding, for care, for love. Does colour exist without perception? That question seems simple at first, but it opens a deep discussion about reality, the mind, and the limits of observation. You see a red apple, a blue sky, green leaves. Colour seems like something out there in the world, attached to objects. But is it? Or is colour something your brain adds to the picture? If no one is there to see it, does colour still exist? Start with physics. Light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. It comes in waves of different lengths. Some wavelengths fall into the range human eyes can detect, what we call visible light. Short wavelengths look blue or violet. Medium ones look green or yellow. Long ones look red. But these colours don't exist in the light itself. The light just carries energy. It's your eyes and brain that turn that energy into experience. When light hits an object, some wavelengths get absorbed and others bounce off. The surface of a red apple absorbs most wavelengths and reflects those in the red range. That reflected light enters your eye. The retina at the back of your eye contains cells called cones. Different types of cones respond to different ranges of light. They send signals to your brain, which combines them and creates the sensation of colour. The apple isn't red in itself. It reflects light that your brain interprets as red. If no one looks at the apple, the light still reflects. The surface still absorbs and bounces wavelengths. The physics continues, but the colour doesn't appear until a mind perceives it. The redness is not in the apple, it's in the experience. That means colour, as you know it, requires perception. You can compare this to sound. When a tree falls, it makes air vibrate. If no one's there to hear it, the pressure waves still happen. But sound, the experience of hearing, needs an ear and a brain. Colour works the same way. The wavelengths exist. The interpretation of those wavelengths as colour does not. Some people find this unsettling. If colour isn't real, does that mean the world is colourless? Not exactly. It means that colour is a secondary property, not a primary one. A primary property is something an object has on its own: mass, shape, size, motion. A secondary property depends on the observer: colour, taste, sound, smell. These qualities feel real, but they arise in the act of perception. Philosophers have known this for centuries. John Locke called colour a secondary quality. He said it doesn't belong to the object itself, but to the interaction between the object and the observer. This view says that objects have the power to cause colour experiences, but not the colour itself. Colour also depends on context. Put the same grey square on a white background and a black background. It looks lighter in one case, darker in the other, but the light coming from the square is the same. Your brain adjusts based on surroundings. It doesn't just record colour, it interprets it. That means your experience of colour can shift even when the physics doesn't. Then there's the question of other eyes. Humans have 3 types of cones, trichromatic vision. Some birds have 4. They can see ultraviolet light. That adds a whole dimension of colour we can't access. Bees see patterns on flowers we never notice. Snakes detect infrared. Dogs see fewer colours. Their world is more muted. The light is the same, but the experience of colour is wildly different across species. So which version is real? None of them, or all of them, depending on how you define real. Even among humans, colour perception varies. Some people are colourblind. They may lack one type of cone or have cones that overlap in sensitivity. A red-green colourblind person can't distinguish those colours the way most people do. Does that mean red and green don't exist for them? Or just that their version of those colours is different? Again, it shows that colour lives in the brain, not in the light. Your own perception of colour isn't constant. Lighting, fatigue, age, drugs, or brain injury can change how you see colour. Some people with brain damage lose the ability to see colour but still know what it is. Others experience colour when they hear music or read numbers, a condition called synesthesia. These effects suggest that colour is tied to how the brain processes input, not to any fixed quality in the outside world. Colour also has no clear edge. There's no boundary where red turns to orange or green to blue. The spectrum blends. You can divide it anywhere. Different cultures group colours in different ways. Some languages have many words for what English speakers call blue. Others have no separate word for blue and green. That doesn't mean the wavelengths change. It means people divide them based on what matters to them. Artists and designers use colour to evoke mood. Red feels warm, energetic, intense. Blue feels cool, calm, distant. These responses are partly cultural, partly biological. They show how colour ties into emotion, memory, and meaning. When you say a sunset is beautiful, it's not just the wavelengths, it's the whole experience. That experience depends on perception. So if no one is there to see a sunset, does it have colour? The light still scatters, short wavelengths still dominate, the sky would still reflect that light. But the fiery orange, the glowing purple, the sense of awe that only exists when a conscious mind turns photons into feeling. Some might say that means colour is an illusion, but that word can mislead. Colour is not fake, it's just not external. It's not like mass or position, it's a property of experience, like pain or flavour. It's real in the sense that it happens in consciousness. If you feel pain, the pain is real. even if no one else can see it. If you see red, red is real to you. That kind of reality is different from physical reality, but not less important. This matters in design, marketing, safety, and communication. Red light signals stop, green means go, blue soothes, yellow alerts. These responses rely on shared perception. Without perception, the signals fail. The colours still reflect light, but they lose their power. So does colour exist without perception? Not in the way we experience it. The wavelengths exist, the reflections happen. But the red, blue, green, or gold, those only arise when a brain sees them. Colour lives in the space between light and mind. Without perception, the world still functions, but it loses its brightness, not because the light fades, but because no one is there to see it shine. Can consciousness be explained scientifically? That question cuts to the core of what we are and what science is able to do. Consciousness is the one thing each person knows for certain. You see, feel, think, and reflect. You are aware. But turning that inner awareness into a scientific problem has proven difficult. We can measure brain activity. We can predict behaviour. But the feeling of being aware, the sense of I, still resists full explanation. The debate is not about whether the brain is involved. It is. The debate is whether that's enough to explain consciousness. Start with what science has already done. Neuroscience maps mental functions to physical structures. The occipital lobe processes vision. The motor cortex controls movement. The amygdala is involved in emotion. When someone is anesthetized, their brain activity drops. When they wake up, it rises. Brain injuries can erase memory, change personality, or wipe out self-awareness. Drugs can expand, distort, or dull conscious experience. All of this shows that consciousness is tied to the brain. But knowing where consciousness happens doesn't tell us how it happens. It's the difference between locating the engine and explaining how combustion creates motion. Science explains things by breaking them into parts. You understand a car by looking at the engine, the fuel, the wheels. But consciousness doesn't split easily. You don't feel your mind as a collection of processes. You feel it as a whole. You don't think, my visual system is activating and my language module is firing. You think, I see, I speak. The I part is central, and science has no consensus on where the I comes from. Some scientists try to reduce consciousness to brain activity. They say the brain is a network of neurons, and when those neurons fire in the right way, awareness emerges. This is called physicalism. It says consciousness is nothing but brain function. If we understand the wiring and the chemicals, we will one day explain consciousness. In this view, consciousness is a product, like heat from friction. When the parts of the brain interact in complex ways, awareness appears. Just like a whirlpool is made of water but has a shape and motion of its own, consciousness is made of neurons but feels like something more. Others argue that this leaves something out. You can describe all the brain activity you want, but that doesn't tell you what it feels like to be someone. This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems are about function, how the brain takes in information, processes it, and produces behaviour. The hard problem is why any of that comes with experience. Why isn't the brain just a robot reacting to input without feeling anything? Why is there something it is like to be you? Science usually avoids questions it can't test. So many scientists focus on neural correlates of consciousness. They try to find what patterns of brain activity line up with conscious experience. If someone says, I saw a red square and a certain part of the brain lights up, that's a correlation. If someone says they feel pain and their brain reacts in a known way, that's more data. Over time, patterns emerge. These studies help us predict consciousness, or detect it in people who can't speak, like coma patients. But they don't explain why those patterns create awareness. One approach is to treat consciousness as an emergent property. The brain has about 86 billion neurons. Each neuron is simple, but their interactions are complex. Some scientists compare this to weather. A A single air molecule means nothing, but billions interacting create storms, currents, and pressure systems. Consciousness might be like that. A global pattern that arises when enough information is processed in the right way. Another idea is the global workspace theory. This says consciousness is what happens when information becomes available across the whole brain. In this model, unconscious processes happen locally. You might see something without being aware of it. But once the signal enters the global workspace, you become conscious of it. This idea fits well with what we observe. You can drive a familiar route without noticing every detail. But when something unexpected happens, a child runs into the road, your attention snaps into place. Consciousness seems to be a way of spotlighting key data and coordinating a response. Still, this doesn't address the why. Why should global access to information come with an inner life? A robot could pass information around its circuits and never be conscious. What makes the brain different? Some theories say we've been looking in the wrong place. They suggest that consciousness is not a product of computation, but of integration. One such theory is integrated information theory, IIT. It says, a system becomes conscious when it contains a high level of information that is both unified and differentiated. According to this theory, consciousness isn't just about complexity. It's about how information is structured. The more integrated the system, the richer the experience. Some versions of this theory even suggest that consciousness could exist in non-human systems, animals, computers, or even parts of nature. But these ideas are still debated. IIT makes bold claims but has trouble being tested. It assigns numbers to consciousness, called phi, but those numbers are hard to verify. Other scientists worry that the theory stretches too far, making everything a little bit conscious, which dilutes the concept. If a thermostat has a tiny bit of awareness, where do we draw the line? This leads to philosophical questions about panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a basic feature of the universe, like mass or charge. In this view, the brain doesn't create consciousness, it organizes it. That might sound strange, but it offers one way to explain why awareness exists at all. Then there's the role of the observer. In quantum mechanics, observation seems to affect the state of a system. Some thinkers link this to consciousness, suggesting that awareness may play a role in shaping reality. These ideas are controversial. Most physicists reject the idea that human consciousness affects quantum outcomes, but the fact that observation matters at all keeps the door open for questions about mind and matter. Even with all these theories, consciousness remains unique. It's the only thing we experience directly. You can doubt the outside world, you can doubt your memories, but you can't doubt that you're aware. That makes consciousness the starting point for all experience, and the hardest thing to pin down in scientific terms. You can think of it like this: science studies objects, but consciousness is the subject. It's the thing doing the observing that creates a gap. To explain consciousness, science has to turn the subject into an object. It has to study awareness from the outside, but awareness is, by nature, inside. That's the challenge. The very tool we use to know the world, consciousness, is the one thing we can't fully measure from the outside, and that doesn't mean science should give up. Tools improve, models grow. What was once mystical becomes measurable, but it does mean that consciousness may stretch the limits of what science can explain in the usual way. It might take new methods, new ideas, or a new framework entirely. Until then, we study what we can see, while living through what we can't fully explain. What happens after death? That question touches every human life, yet no one has a final answer. Some believe in heaven, hell, reincarnation, or a spirit world. Others think death is the end of consciousness. Science focuses on what can be observed. Religion and philosophy explore what might lie beyond. The body dies, the heart stops, the brain shuts down. But what happens to the mind, if anything, remains unknown. Start with the physical facts. When a person dies, biological functions cease. The heart no longer pumps blood. The brain loses oxygen and stops sending electrical signals. Cells begin to break down. Without circulation, the body cools, stiffens, and decomposes. That part is clear. Medical professionals use specific criteria to determine death. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no response to stimuli. Once those functions stop and don't return, death is declared. But those are the signs of death. They don't explain what happens to the person who was alive, the sense of I. You can look at the body and confirm it's no longer functioning. You can't point to the self and say where it went. That opens the door to deeper questions. Some argue that consciousness ends at death. The brain produces awareness. When the brain dies, the mind dies. That view treats consciousness as a biological process, dependent on neurons, synapses, and chemistry. Just like a flame goes out when the fuel is gone, awareness ends when the brain can no longer function. In this view, death is non-existence, not sleep, not silence, but absence. There's no pain, no fear, no thought, because there's no one left to experience anything. That's not comforting to everyone, but it fits what we know about how consciousness depends on brain activity. Others see it differently. They say the self is more than the brain. They believe in a soul, spirit, or non-physical essence. That part, they say, survives death. Where it goes depends on the belief system. In Christianity, many believe the soul goes to heaven or hell depending on faith and deeds. Some see death as a passage to eternal life. Others expect a final judgment. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the soul, or something like it, enters a new body. That's reincarnation. The cycle of death and rebirth continues until a person reaches liberation, called moksha or nirvana. These beliefs shape how people live. If you think actions in this life affect the next one, you may act differently. If you expect to meet loved ones again, death feels less final. But these are moral and metaphysical claims, not scientific ones. They're based on scriptures, traditions, and personal faith. They can't be tested, measured, or proven in the usual way. Still, billions of people hold them deeply, and they offer comfort, hope, and meaning. Then there are near-death experiences. Some people who have been close to death during surgery, cardiac arrest, or trauma report vivid experiences. They describe floating above their bodies, moving through tunnels, meeting deceased relatives, or feeling deep peace. Some interpret these as glimpses of an afterlife. Others say they show that the mind can exist apart from the body. But critics point out that these experiences happen when some brain activity is still present. Oxygen loss, chemical surges, and altered brain states can create powerful sensations. People may feel out of body because the brain's sense of space and identity breaks down. The experience feels real, but that doesn't mean it shows what happens after death. It may just show what the dying brain does. There are also reports of past life memories. Some children claim to remember lives they haven't lived. Researchers have studied these cases, looking for patterns and evidence. In rare cases, the memories include details that seem hard to explain, but memory is fragile. Children absorb stories and images without knowing it. The line between imagination and recall is thin. So while some stories are striking, they don't prove reincarnation. They raise questions, not conclusions. Some thinkers suggest that consciousness doesn't die because it never really began. They propose that awareness is a basic part of the universe, like space or time. The brain doesn't create consciousness, they say. It channels it. When the brain dies, consciousness continues in another form. This is the view behind some spiritual and mystical philosophies. But again, it's a theory, not a testable fact. There's no way to confirm what happens to awareness without being there, and coming back with proof. Quantum physics sometimes enters these discussions. Some people misinterpret it to support ideas about the soul or alternate realities. They say particles behave differently when observed, so maybe the mind affects the world in deep ways. But most physicists reject those claims. Quantum effects don't mean that consciousness survives death. They describe tiny particles, not minds or selves. What makes the question hard is that it mixes facts, beliefs, fears, and hopes. Death ends the physical body. That's certain. What happens to the self, the part that says I, remains a mystery. We can't remember being dead. We can't ask the dead what they experienced. We only know that death ends life as we know it. But not all questions have final answers. Some remain open, not because they are unimportant, but because they lie beyond the tools we use to answer them. Death is one of those questions. Each culture, religion, and person responds in its own way. Some accept death as the end, others see it as a transition. Still others live with the mystery. That mystery shapes human behaviour. People grieve, but also create rituals. They bury or burn bodies with care. They mark graves, light candles, speak names. These acts don't bring the dead back, but they reflect a belief that death is not nothing. It's an event, a passage, a transformation. Whether it leads to something or ends everything, it matters. Even if there's nothing after death, the idea of death makes life feel more urgent. It reminds us that time is limited, that moments matter, that love and loss are real. If death is a door, we don't know what's behind it. If it's a wall, then the time before it becomes even more precious. So what happens after death? The body stops, the brain ends, the world goes on. As for the self, the awareness, the part that wonders what happens, no one can say for sure. All we know is that the question never leaves us. It follows us from the first funeral to our own final breath. And in asking it, we show something vital, that we care what life means and that we're aware it ends. Are we alone in the universe? That question has haunted humanity for as long as we've looked up at the stars. It's simple to ask but difficult to answer. We live on one planet, orbiting one star, in one galaxy among hundreds of billions. The known universe stretches over 90 billion light years and holds more galaxies than we can count. Each galaxy contains billions of stars. Many of those stars have planets. Some of those planets are in the right conditions to support life. And yet, so far, we have not seen a single sign of life beyond Earth. The numbers alone suggest we shouldn't be alone. Astronomers estimate that our galaxy alone may have over 100 billion planets. A fair number of those are likely to be Earth-like, rocky planets in the habitable zone, where liquid water could exist. Water is key to life as we know it. If conditions like those on Earth are common, it seems likely that life could develop elsewhere too. In 2020, a study suggested there might be as many as 300 million potentially habitable planets in the Milky Way. That's just one galaxy. We also know that life on Earth began early. The planet formed about 4.5 billion years ago. The first evidence of life dates back at least 3.5 billion years. That means life started quickly, as soon as conditions were stable. If life forms easily under the right circumstances, then it might have appeared elsewhere too. Life here is also incredibly resilient. Microbes live in boiling vents, acidic lakes, and deep ice. They survive radiation, pressure, and starvation. Life can adapt to extremes, which widens the range of places it could exist. But the presence of life isn't the same as the presence of intelligent life. Simple organisms may be common. Intelligence may not be. On Earth, complex life took billions of years to evolve. Homo sapiens have only existed for about 300,000 years. Civilization is younger than that. Modern technology has been around for just a few centuries. That's a blink in cosmic time. Other intelligent life might be rare, short-lived, or too far away to detect. That brings us to the Fermi paradox. It goes like this. If intelligent life is common in the universe, and if some of it becomes advanced enough to travel or send signals, then where is everyone? We've searched the skies with radio telescopes for decades. We've looked for signs of alien technology, such as powerful energy sources or artificial structures. So far, nothing. No signals, no visits, no artifacts, just silence. There are several possible explanations. One is that intelligent life is very rare. Maybe Earth is a fluke, a planet where all the pieces fell into place just right. Maybe life elsewhere stays simple, or maybe it collapses before reaching space. Civilizations might destroy themselves through war, pollution, or resource exhaustion. That's called the Great Filter. If it's ahead of us, we're in trouble. If it's behind us, we're lucky to be here. Another explanation is distance. Space is huge. Even if aliens are out there, they might be so far away that we'll never reach each other. Light takes time to travel. If a planet is 1,000 light years away, any message we send would take 1,000 years to get there, and 1,000 years for a reply, and that assumes they understand us and choose to answer. Radio signals grow weaker over distance. A faint whisper from another world might be lost in background noise. It's also possible that alien life is not using the kind of technology we expect. We search for radio waves because that's what we use, but advanced civilizations might communicate in ways we don't understand, through neutrinos, gravity waves, or quantum signals. They might use encryption, making their messages indistinguishable from randomness, or they might choose to stay quiet. A civilization that knows other species exist might avoid broadcasting its location. We do that with endangered animals. Sometimes the best strategy is to hide. There's also the chance that we've already seen alien life and failed to recognize it. Some theories suggest that aliens could exist in forms we can't imagine, non-carbon based, non-biological, or even embedded in physical laws. They might be artificial intelligences living in simulations or distributed across networks. They may not build cities or send signals. Their goals and behaviour might be beyond anything we understand. We look for life that resembles us because that's what we know, but life might take other forms. Closer to home, we continue to search for life in our solar system. Mars once had water, it still has ice. Robotic missions look for chemical signs of past or present life. Jupiter's moon, Europa, and Saturn's moon, Enceladus, have subsurface oceans beneath ice crusts. They have the ingredients for life: water, energy, and chemistry. Missions are planned to explore them. Finding even simple microbes would change everything. It would prove that life is not unique to Earth. We also search exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars. New telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope can analyze the atmospheres of these planets. Scientists look for biosignatures, chemical patterns that suggest life, like oxygen, methane, or unusual ratios of gases. We haven't found definitive signs yet, but the search continues. Every discovery brings us closer. Some people believe aliens have already visited Earth. They point to sightings, reports, and unexplained objects. Governments have investigated some of these cases. In recent years, US defense officials released videos of unidentified aerial phenomena, objects that behave strangely. But no case so far proves alien origin. Most experts believe these sightings have natural or human explanations. Until evidence is clear, such claims remain unproven. At the same time, some scientists work on the possibility of contact. Organisations like SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, scan the skies for signals. Others develop protocols for how to respond if we ever hear from another world. These discussions raise hard questions. Who speaks for Earth? What do we say? Should we respond at all? The idea that we are not alone is both exciting and unsettling. It means we are part of a wider community of life. But it also means we are not the centre. It challenges religion, philosophy, and the story we tell about ourselves. If alien civilizations exist and are older or wiser, what does that mean for human progress? The idea that we're alone carries its own weight. It makes Earth even more precious. If life is rare, then protecting it matters more. If no one is coming to save us, we must take care of each other. Our planet becomes not just a home, but a fragile exception in a vast, silent universe. So are we alone? We don't know. Not yet. We search. We watch. We wonder. The universe is quiet, but it is not empty. Whether we find others or not, the question will stay with us. as long as we keep looking at the stars. Why is there something rather than nothing? That question sits at the edge of everything we know. It doesn't ask about what exists or how it behaves. It asks why there is anything to ask about at all. The universe could have been empty. No space, no time, no matter, no thoughts. But it isn't. It's full. Stars burn, planets move, people think. Something exists. Why? Most questions look for causes within a system. Why does it rain? Because water evaporates, clouds form, and the temperature drops. Why do birds migrate? Because of seasonal changes in food and climate. Those questions have answers built into the structure of the world. But why is there something rather than nothing? It doesn't stay inside the system. It questions the system itself. It asks why there's a framework in the first place. One answer says the question doesn't need a reason. Something exists because it does. Maybe the universe is just a brute fact, something that doesn't depend on anything else. In that case, there's no cause, there's no deeper layer, it just is. This idea removes the need for explanation, but it feels unsatisfying. Human minds expect reasons. When a light turns on, we look for the switch. When a sound breaks the silence, we ask what caused it. So we keep pressing. Some scientists suggest that the laws of physics explain why there is something. In quantum field theory, even what we call empty space is not truly empty. It contains energy. Particles can appear and disappear. This is called quantum fluctuation. According to some models, the universe could have begun as a fluctuation in a quantum vacuum. The vacuum is a kind of lowest energy state, unstable and ready to spark a universe into existence. If the laws of physics allow space and time to arise from such a state, then maybe the question is answered. Something comes from the vacuum because it must, given the rules. But that only pushes the question back. Why do those laws exist? Why is there a vacuum with potential instead of true nothingness? A quantum vacuum still has structure. It follows rules. It allows events. That's not nothing. It's something very simple. So the question becomes, why does that simple something exist? Others propose that nothingness is unstable. It's not that something had to exist. It's that pure nothing could not last. In this view, nothing is not a neutral option. It's a special state with no content, no time, no space. And maybe that state is impossible. Maybe once you try to imagine nothing, you discover that something always creeps in. A blank slate still has the idea of blankness. Pure absence may not be coherent. Mathematics may offer another clue. Some thinkers argue that the universe exists because mathematical truths must exist. 2 + 2 = 4, no matter what. These truths don't depend on space or time. They are timeless. If those truths exist, and if they can describe a universe, then maybe the universe exists as a kind of mathematical structure. This idea says the physical world is a special case of mathematical logic. In that case, something exists because everything that can exist does exist, at least in the form of pure logic. But mathematical truth is abstract. It doesn't explain why a physical universe takes shape. You can write down the equation for a circle, but that doesn't draw one on paper. The rules exist. But why do they become real? What turns structure into substance? Some philosophers and theologians say the answer is God. In this view, something exists because God chose to create it. God is seen as a necessary being, something that cannot not exist. Everything else is contingent, optional, dependent, possible. But God, in this view, exists by nature. God's existence explains everything else. This answer doesn't stop inquiry, but it changes its focus. It asks what kind of being could explain being itself. But then another question comes. Why does God exist? If God just is, then why can't the universe just be? That leads back to the idea of necessary versus contingent existence. A necessary thing exists in all possible worlds. You can't imagine a reality without it. A contingent thing could exist or not. A chair is contingent. So is the moon. But is the universe itself contingent? Or is it necessary? If it's necessary, then maybe it had to exist, and the question ends. If it's contingent, then something must explain it. Some thinkers believe the question is unanswerable, not because it's wrong, but because it lies outside our mental tools. We evolved to solve problems, find food, avoid danger, build shelter. We didn't evolve to understand why existence exists. So when we ask, why is there something rather than nothing, we may be reaching beyond what the mind can grasp. That doesn't mean we stop asking. It means we ask with humility. Others argue that nothing is not a real possibility. It's an idea we invented, not a state that could ever exist. You can imagine an empty room. You can imagine space without objects. But total nothingness? No space, no time, no laws, no logic? That might be a contradiction. If nothing is incoherent, then something is the only option. The question vanishes because its opposite never made sense. Still, the question keeps coming back. It cuts deeper than curiosity. It touches how we think about purpose, identity, and meaning. If everything began for no reason, that suggests a cold universe. If something chose to begin it, that hints at intention. We don't just ask about stars and atoms, we ask about ourselves. Why are we here? Why is anything here? The question starts with physics, but it ends in philosophy. No matter what view you take, one fact remains. There is something. You're reading this. The world exists. Time flows. Matter moves. That's already strange. Most people forget how strange it is. We treat existence as normal, but it isn't. It's the most unlikely thing, and yet, it's real. Even if no answer satisfies everyone, the act of asking matters. It shows that humans aren't just organisms reacting to stimuli. We wonder, we reflect, we imagine a blank universe, and then ask why it isn't blank. That kind of question doesn't solve problems, it doesn't build tools, but it shows what kind of mind asks it. A mind that isn't content with survival. A mind that wants to know why there's anything to survive at all. If time travel is possible, where are the time travelers? That question points to a puzzle. Time travel shows up in science fiction, theoretical physics, and everyday conversation. But if it really can happen, if people in the future ever build a working time machine, why haven't we met any of them? Why hasn't anyone from the year 3000 visited the year 2025? This question is similar to the Fermi paradox. In that case, we ask, if alien life is possible, why don't we see it? In the case of time travel, we ask, if moving backward or forward in time is possible, why don't we see travelers? It seems like we should, but we don't. That absence raises questions about whether time travel can exist at all, and if it can, what rules might keep it hidden? Start with physics. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not separate from space. Together they form space-time, a four-dimensional fabric that can stretch, bend, and twist. Gravity affects time. Clocks tick slower near massive objects. This has been confirmed with satellites and atomic clocks. If you orbit the Earth, time moves slightly slower for you than for someone on the ground. That's real time travel, just not dramatic. It's more like drift than leap. Special relativity adds more. If you move near the speed of light, time slows down for you. This is called time dilation. In theory, if you travel far enough and fast enough, you could return to Earth and find that more time passed here than for you. That's forward time travel. It doesn't break the laws of physics. It just requires technology we don't yet have. But it wouldn't let you travel into the past. Traveling backward is harder. Some solutions in general relativity allow it. Wormholes, for example, are theoretical bridges between distant points in space-time. If you could stabilize one end and move it at high speed, time might pass differently on each end. That could create a time difference. a kind of loop. Go through one end and you come out earlier than when you entered. But wormholes are speculative. They require exotic matter with negative energy, something no one has found. Other solutions involve closed time-like curves. These are paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. If such curves exist, a person could, in theory, return to an earlier moment. But most physicists think the conditions required are too unstable or too unlikely to exist in the real universe. They solve the math, but they don't show up in nature. Even if time travel were physically possible, it might be limited. A common idea is that a time machine can only take you back to the moment it was created. If someone builds a machine in 2100, no one can use it to travel to 2025, because the machine didn't exist yet. In that case, time travel exists, but not in the way people imagine. You can go back, but only within the lifetime of the machine. That would explain why no one from the future has visited us. The machine hasn't been invented yet. Another possibility is that time travel creates alternate timelines. This is common in fiction. You go back in time, change something, and create a new branch of reality. Your original timeline continues, but the new one splits off. In that case, travellers from the future would not appear in our past. They would land in alternate versions of it. If that's how time works, then we wouldn't expect to see visitors. They'd be elsewhere. There's also the paradox problem. Suppose someone travels back and prevents their own birth. That's the grandfather paradox. If they succeed, they were never born, so they never travelled back. But if they didn't travel back, they were born. That kind of loop creates a contradiction. Some theories resolve it by saying time protects itself. You can't change the past. You can visit it, but not alter it. That's called the Novikov self-consistency principle. It means any action you take in the past must already be part of history. That would stop travellers from disrupting the present, but it also makes time travel less useful. Other solutions involve probability. Maybe every possible timeline exists. If you go back and change something, you jump to a timeline where that change happened. But you can't return to your original one. That would stop you from altering your own past. It would also mean your visit has no effect here. Again, that might explain the absence of time travellers. Then there's the social explanation. What if time travel exists, but travellers choose not to reveal themselves? They might have rules, similar to the Prime Directive in Star Trek. Don't interfere, don't reveal, don't change anything. If time travellers follow strict guidelines, they could observe us without being seen. They might hide, blend in, or use technology to stay invisible. That sounds far-fetched, but not impossible. Human societies already do this in wildlife studies. Researchers watch animals without interfering. Another possibility is simple failure. Maybe time travel is technically possible, but no one ever does it. The cost might be too high, the risks might be too great, or civilizations may destroy themselves before reaching that level. Just because something can happen doesn't mean it will. Finally, consider human behaviour. If a time traveller showed up today, would we believe them? Probably not. We'd assume it was a prank, a hoax, or a delusion. Even if someone told the truth, we might dismiss them. That adds a layer of invisibility. The traveller isn't hiding, we're just not listening. Some have tried to test the question directly. In 2009, physicist Stephen Hawking held a party for time travellers. He sent out invitations after the party happened. No one came. He used the event as a demonstration. If time travel to the past were real, someone would have shown up. But one event proves little. The rules, if they exist, might forbid casual visits. So where are the time travellers? They might be bound by physics. They might be limited by timeline rules. They might be hiding, restricted, or too far in the future. Or time travel might never happen. Each explanation fits what we see or don't see, but no explanation closes the case. Until someone arrives and proves otherwise, the mystery remains. Time travel may be a future science, a logical puzzle, or a dream that can't come true. But the question stays. It invites us to imagine, to test, to ask what's possible and what's hidden just out of view. Is free will an illusion? That question sits at the intersection of philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, and law. On the surface, it feels like we have free will. You choose what to eat, when to speak, and what to believe. You pause, reflect, and change your mind. These moments feel like choices. They feel like freedom. But when you look deeper into how the brain works and how decisions form, the picture becomes less clear. You start to wonder, did I really choose, or did something choose for me? The traditional idea of free will says that people are autonomous agents. You can act differently in the same situation. Your actions aren't fully determined by outside forces. You could have done otherwise. That view supports ideas like responsibility, blame, and praise. If you make a bad choice, it's your fault. If you make a good one, it's your merit. The justice system depends on that. So do moral codes. But science complicates the picture. The brain is a physical system. It runs on neurons, electricity, and chemicals. If your thoughts and feelings come from brain activity, and that brain follows physical laws, where does freedom fit in? In the 1980s, an experiment by Benjamin Libet shook the discussion. He asked people to move their hand whenever they wanted, and to note the moment they felt the intention to move. Meanwhile, electrodes recorded their brain activity. What Libet found was surprising. Brain signals began about 300 milliseconds before people reported the conscious decision. The brain was already preparing the action before the person became aware of choosing it. That result raised a serious question. If the brain acts before the mind decides, is the decision real? Or is the feeling of choice just a story told after the fact? Libet thought consciousness still played a role. He suggested that while we may not start actions, we can stop them. He called this a veto. But the deeper challenge remained. Are we in charge of our actions, or are we just observers of a process already underway? Later studies went further. Some showed that decisions could be predicted several seconds before subjects became aware of them. Researchers looked at brain patterns and guessed choices before the participants reported making them. That doesn't prove that choices are fully determined, but it does suggest that unconscious processes shape them long before we notice. At the same time, psychology shows that many decisions come from habits, biases, and triggers we don't control. You might reach for a snack not because you chose to, but because of stress, lighting, or memory. You may vote based on feelings formed by slogans or colours. You may get angry because of something your parents used to say. The more we study behaviour, the more we find causes beneath awareness. None of this means people are robots. The brain is flexible. It learns, adapts, and reasons, but its outputs depend on its inputs: genetics, upbringing, environment, experiences. You didn't choose your genes, you didn't choose your early life, you didn't pick your first language, your parents, or your culture. These things shape who you are. Later choices emerge from that foundation. Philosophers call this determinism, the idea that every event follows from prior events. If the universe is deterministic, then everything that happens, including your thoughts, was set in motion long ago. If that's true, then free will as traditionally understood doesn't exist. You feel free, but your choices follow from prior causes. Some try to save free will by redefining it. Instead of asking, could I have done otherwise, holding everything else equal, they ask, am I acting in line with my desires, values, and reasons? If you aren't being coerced, and your actions reflect who you are, then maybe that's enough. You're not free in a cosmic sense, but you're free in a practical one. This is called compatibilism. It says free will and determinism can coexist. Critics say compatibilism changes the subject. If your desires are caused by things you didn't choose, then acting on them still isn't real freedom. It's just a chain reaction wearing a mask of choice. They say free will requires that you be the originator of your actions. But if every part of you is shaped by something else, how can that be? Then there's randomness. Some argue that quantum events introduce unpredictability into the brain. If a neuron fires due to chance, maybe that breaks the chain of determinism. But randomness doesn't help free will either. A random twitch is not a choice. If your decision changes because of a coin flip in your neurons, that's not freedom, it's noise. So we're stuck between two extremes: determinism, which makes everything fixed, and randomness, which makes actions meaningless. Where does that leave free will? One answer is to shift the focus. Instead of asking, "Is free will real?" ask, "What kind of control matters?" You may not control your first thoughts, but you can reflect, you can pause, you can resist, you can learn from mistakes. These aren't ultimate freedoms, but they're real. They shape how you live. They matter in law, ethics, and love. Some thinkers suggest that free will is more like a skill. It grows with attention and practice. A toddler acts on impulse. An adult learns to think ahead. You may not choose your desires, but you can shape them over time. That process involves feedback, reflection, and effort. It's not pure freedom, but it's not illusion either. There's also the issue of how free will feels. The experience of choosing is vivid. You stand at a crossroads and pick a path. You know what it's like to change your mind, to regret, to wonder what might have been. These feelings may be constructed, but they're powerful. They shape identity. If they're illusions, they're deep ones. Still, science shows that our sense of control is fragile. You can trick someone into thinking they made a choice they didn't. You can influence decisions by changing context. The brain fills in stories to make sense of actions. It wants coherence, even if the process is messy underneath. That means free will may be less about control and more about the narrative of control. In the end, free will might not be an all or nothing concept. It might be layered. You're not free to pick your genes, but you can act within the structure they create. You're not free to escape causality, but you can reflect and respond. You can shape your future even if you didn't choose your past. Whether that counts as real, free will, depends on how you define it. But it's the kind of agency we live with, the kind that shapes choices and consequences every day. Is the universe infinite or just very large? That question touches on the structure of reality itself. It asks whether space goes on forever or stops somewhere, if not with an edge, then with a curve. It's one of those questions that seems simple at first, but quickly becomes hard to answer. Even scientists don't fully agree, because the data we have can only go so far. The rest depends on models, assumptions, and what the math allows. The part of the universe we can observe is not infinite. It's about 93 billion light-years across. That number comes from how far light has travelled since the universe began, about 13.8 billion years ago, combined with the expansion of space itself. Because the universe has been stretching, light from early galaxies has been carried farther away. So we see things that are now much more distant than the age of the universe in light-years might suggest. This visible region is called the observable universe. It's not the whole universe, it's just the part we can see. Beyond that, light hasn't had time to reach us. If the universe continues beyond what we can observe, we don't know how far it goes. It might stretch forever, or it might loop back on itself like the surface of a sphere. That distinction between what we can see and what might exist is important. To figure out whether the universe is infinite or finite, scientists look at two things: geometry and topology. Geometry tells us how space behaves. General relativity links the geometry of space to its contents, matter and energy. If space has a lot of mass, it can curve. If you add enough mass, space can curve so much that it closes in on itself. That would make the universe finite but unbounded, like the surface of a balloon. You could travel in one direction forever and eventually return to your starting point without hitting an edge. If the universe has low mass energy density, space can be open. That means it keeps expanding outward, curving away like a saddle. In that case, it would be infinite. If the mass energy density is just right, the universe is flat. Flat space can be infinite or finite depending on the topology. Right now, the best evidence says the universe is flat, or extremely close to flat. That comes from measuring the cosmic microwave background, the leftover glow from the Big Bang. Tiny temperature differences in that background tell us about the shape of space. If the universe had strong curvature, those patterns would be distorted. But we don't see that. The data suggests flatness within a small margin of error. That pushes us toward the idea of an infinite universe. But geometry alone doesn't settle the question. You also need topology, which describes the shape and connectivity of space. Imagine a video game map that wraps around. You walk off one side and reappear on the other. That's a finite space with flat geometry. In the same way, the universe could be finite but still flat, if it wraps around in the right way. That would make space like a 3D version of a torus or donut. In theory, if light travelled far enough in the right direction, it might loop back to us from behind. Scientists have tried to detect such patterns. They've searched for repeating structures in the cosmic microwave background, like looking for a wallpaper pattern. So far, nothing has turned up. That doesn't prove the universe is infinite. It just means that if space does loop, the loops are bigger than our observable patch. If the room we're in is curved, the walls are too far to see. Then there's the question of expansion. The universe has been expanding since the Big Bang. Galaxies are moving away from each other. The farther they are, the faster they recede. That expansion stretches space itself. It's not like galaxies moving through empty space. It's space growing between them. Some parts of the universe are now receding from us faster than light, not because they're breaking a speed limit, but because space is expanding so fast that light can't bridge the gap. That creates a cosmic horizon. Beyond it, we can't see and never will. This expanding horizon limits what we can know. Even if the universe is finite, we might never observe the full structure. The light from distant regions may never reach us. That means the question of infinity is partly untestable. We can build models, but we may never confirm them directly. The evidence we have fits both scenarios. Some scientists lean toward infinity because it simplifies the math. An infinite flat universe is easier to work with than a finite one with complex topology. It matches our observations without needing extra features. Others remain cautious. Infinity is a heavy claim. You can never fully prove it. You can only say, we see no sign of a boundary. That doesn't mean one doesn't exist. There's also the philosophical side. Infinity is strange. It means every arrangement of matter, every possible planet, every possible person exists somewhere. If the universe is infinite, then there's another region where Earth exists, just slightly different. And another where you exist but made a different choice this morning. That's not science fiction. It's basic probability in an infinite system. If space is endless and matter is distributed roughly evenly, then every combination plays out eventually. But that depends on assumptions. The universe might be infinite in size but not in variety. It might repeat only within limits, or the initial conditions might constrain what's possible. Infinity doesn't guarantee every version of everything. It just allows it. On the other hand, if the universe is finite, it raises a different kind of question. What lies outside it? If space is like the surface of a sphere, then there's no edge, but also no outside. Still, people imagine something beyond, like stepping off the edge of a map. That's because we live in three-dimensional space and think in terms of boundaries. But a closed universe doesn't need an outside. It can be self-contained. So we're left with a tension. The data supports a flat, possibly infinite universe, but we can't see far enough to know, and the nature of space may hide the answer forever. Whether the universe is infinite or just very, very large may remain one of the deepest questions we ask, always just beyond the edge of what we can measure. What existed before existence? That question cuts to the heart of what it means for anything to be. It pushes language to its limit. Before refers to time. Existence refers to being. If existence includes time, space, matter, and energy, then asking what came before it already assumes something that might not apply. You're using the concept of time to ask about a state where time may not have existed. That doesn't mean the question is meaningless. It means the question reveals the limits of how we think. The universe, as we observe it, began about 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang. That event marks the start of space and time as we know them. It wasn't an explosion in space, it was the expansion of space itself. Every point moved away from every other point. Time started ticking, space started stretching. Matter and radiation filled the cosmos. From that moment on, physical processes unfolded, atoms formed, stars ignited, galaxies spun, planets cooled. But what about before the Big Bang? That's where things get difficult. General relativity, our best theory of gravity, breaks down at the very beginning. The equations that describe space and time don't work when the universe is compressed into an extremely dense, hot point, what physicists call a singularity. That doesn't mean a singularity actually existed. It means our tools stop working. They reach their limit. To go further, we need a theory that unifies general relativity with quantum mechanics. That's the goal of quantum gravity, but it remains incomplete. Some proposals try to describe what might have come before the Big Bang. One is the idea of a bounce. In this view, the universe didn't begin from nothing. It was preceded by a prior phase, perhaps a collapsing universe that bounced back and expanded again. This is called a cyclic or oscillating model. The universe grows, contracts, and repeats. Each cycle may wipe out most traces of the last, but not all. Some versions of this theory suggest echoes of previous cycles might be detected in the cosmic microwave background, though no clear signal has been found so far. Another idea comes from quantum cosmology. In this view, the universe may have emerged from a quantum state without time as we know it. Instead of a before, there was a timeless quantum realm, pure potential, governed by probabilities. The birth of the universe was not like a moment in a timeline, but a shift from timelessness to time. This resembles how, in physics, particles can tunnel through barriers they could not cross under classical laws. The universe, in this view, tunneled into being. The concept of before doesn't apply. Time itself emerged with the universe. The physicist Stephen Hawking once proposed a no-boundary model. In it, space-time is finite but has no edge. Like the surface of a sphere, it curves without boundary. In this model, asking what came before the universe is like asking what's north of the North Pole. There is no before, because time is curved and closed off at the beginning. The past doesn't extend infinitely. It has a rounded beginning, not a sharp one. Other theories explore the idea of a multiverse. Our universe might be one bubble in a vast foam of universes. Each bubble has its own beginning, its own laws. Some bubbles expand like ours, others collapse, some may never form matter. In this picture, the Big Bang was local. Beyond it lies a larger structure, eternal inflation or some quantum landscape. But even then the question returns, what started the multiverse? What lies beyond that? Some argue that nothing preceded existence, because nothingness itself is unstable. In quantum theory, even a vacuum has energy. Virtual particles pop in and out of existence. Some physicists, like Lawrence Krauss, suggest that nothing in physics isn't truly nothing. It's a quantum field in a lowest energy state. That field can fluctuate, and with the right fluctuation, a universe can arise. But this assumes the existence of quantum laws, fields, and potential, so it doesn't explain why there is anything instead of nothing. It just shifts the question. Then there's the philosophical side. What does nothing even mean? Can we imagine it? People often picture an empty void, blackness, silence, absence. But that's still something. It has space and time. True nothing would be the absence of all things. No space, no time, no laws, no potential. If nothing truly means nothing, Can it give rise to anything? If it can't, then perhaps nothingness was never an option. Existence may be the default state. That brings us to necessity. Some thinkers argue that something must exist because non-existence is not stable. If you imagine all the ways nothing could remain nothing, they require rules. But rules are already something. The moment you imagine structure, you leave pure nothingness. In this view, existence is necessary, not because it was caused by something else, but because reality can't not be. Others appeal to mathematics. They say mathematical truths exist independently of the universe. 2 + 2 = 4, whether or not anyone is there to count. These truths don't change. They don't depend on time or space. If they exist, and if some of them describe a universe, maybe that's enough. The structure exists, and perhaps structure becomes substance. In that view, existence arises from the logic of possible patterns. Some say the universe was created by a divine being. God, in this view, exists necessarily and chose to create the universe. This answers the question of what existed before God did. But it raises a new question. Why does God exist? If God needs no explanation, why not say the same about the universe? Theological explanations provide a different kind of answer, one that appeals to intention rather than mechanism. But they don't remove the mystery. They place it in a different frame. There's also the possibility that we're asking the wrong question. We live in time, so we think in terms of before and after. But time may be part of the thing we're trying to explain. Asking what came before time might be like asking what's outside the edge of a circle. It's a question formed in the wrong language. Still, we ask. Not because we expect an easy answer, but because the question points to something deep. Existence is not obvious. It's not a given. It's something we notice and wonder about. Even if no answer feels final, the act of asking pulls us toward the edge of understanding. What existed before existence may be unanswerable in human terms. But the question shows that we're not just part of the universe, we're part of the effort to make sense of it. Can an omnipotent being create a stone it cannot lift? That question is often used to challenge the idea of unlimited power. It's not just about stones or strength. It's about whether the concept of omnipotence, total power, can make sense without breaking itself. If a being can do anything, then it should be able to create such a stone. But if it creates one and cannot lift it, then there's something it can't do. If it can lift every stone, then it can't create one that it can't lift. Either way, the being seems not to be all-powerful. That's the paradox. The question sounds simple, but it depends on how you define omnipotence. If omnipotence means being able to do anything, even contradictions, then yes, it should be possible to create the stone. But if you say that, then the being can also do things like be both square and round at the same time. It can make 2 + 2 = 5. It can make a triangle with 4 sides. At that point, logic breaks down. You're not just saying the being is powerful, you're saying logic itself no longer applies. Most philosophers reject that version of omnipotence. They argue that true power doesn't include the power to do the logically impossible. That's not because the being is weak, but because nonsense isn't a real task. It's like asking whether someone can draw a colourless red square. The request cancels itself out. It doesn't point to a real action, it points to an incoherent idea. In this view, omnipotence means being able to do anything that can actually be done, anything that makes logical sense. So an omnipotent being can create anything possible, lift any weight, shape any universe, but it can't do what can't be done in principle. It can't create a square circle or a stone too heavy for itself. Not because it's limited, but because those are not real actions. This doesn't weaken the idea of omnipotence, it refines it. Power isn't about absurdities, it's about what can exist. If you say a being is all-powerful, you mean it has full control over reality and the laws that govern it. It doesn't mean the being can break those laws in self-contradictory ways. Still, the question serves a purpose. It forces us to ask, what do we mean when we say all-powerful? Are we thinking clearly about power, or are we stretching words past meaning? Consider this example. Can an omnipotent being create a rule it cannot break? If it can, then it creates a limit. If it can't, then it cannot create such a rule. Again, either outcome seems to limit power, but the better way to see it is this. If the being creates the rule and chooses not to break it, that's not a weakness. That's an act of will. It shows control, not lack of it. The being could break the rule, but doesn't. So the limitation is self-imposed, not forced. Or think about self-restraint. If someone is strong enough to crush a cup but chooses not to, that choice doesn't make them weak. It shows mastery. In the same way, if an all-powerful being sets the laws of the universe and follows them, that doesn't show a limit. It shows consistency. The paradox also reveals something about how language works. We combine words that make grammatical sense, like, a stone an omnipotent being cannot lift. But just because the sentence is grammatical doesn't mean it points to something real. Language can form empty shapes. It can create questions that dissolve when you look closer. That's what this paradox does. The same problem happens in other areas. Can an irresistible force meet an immovable object? If the force is irresistible, the object must move. If the object is immovable, the force must fail. You can't have both. The setup cancels itself out. It's not a test of power. It's a misuse of concepts. Some thinkers go further and say that omnipotence must include consistency. If a being could violate logic, then anything could be true. The being could exist and not exist. It could be good and evil at once. It could promise something and break the promise without breaking it. That would make knowledge, trust, and reason impossible. So in order to make sense of omnipotence, you need logic. And once you accept logic, you accept that some things are impossible by nature. Others take a more poetic view. They say that omnipotence includes the ability to act beyond human categories. What looks like a paradox to us may not be one from a higher perspective. The problem, they argue, is not the idea of omnipotence. It's our limited understanding. Maybe the being can lift the stone and not lift it in a way we can't imagine. But this pushes the discussion out of reason and into mystery. It's not wrong, but it steps away from analysis. The stone paradox also raises questions about perfection. If the being is perfect, then its actions must be meaningful. Creating a stone it cannot lift would serve no purpose. It would be an act against itself, a kind of logical suicide. A perfect being would not do something pointless. So the very idea of the stone becomes inconsistent with the nature of such a being. The paradox only works if you imagine an all-powerful being doing something meaningless. But that's not how power works. True power doesn't waste itself. In debates about God, this paradox often serves as a challenge to simplistic ideas. It shows that power, like anything else, needs careful thought. You can't just say, all-powerful, and move on. You have to ask, what kind of power? Over what? Within what structure? Does power include self-contradiction, or does it rise above it? So, can an omnipotent being create a stone it cannot lift? Not if omnipotence means coherent power. Not if the stone itself is a contradiction in terms. And not if the being is also rational and consistent. But if you define omnipotence as including the power to do even the logically impossible, then yes, but that makes everything meaningless. Once you let go of logic, any answer becomes acceptable, and when anything is possible, nothing means anything. That's why most serious thinkers reject the paradox as a trick of language. It asks a question that looks deep, but falls apart under analysis. Not because the question is foolish, but because it points to a deeper truth, that even the most powerful idea must still make sense, and power, to be real, must work within the structure of reality, not against it. What is the meaning of life? That question has no single answer. It's been asked in every culture, in every age, by people of all backgrounds. It's the kind of question that doesn't go away, even when you try to ignore it. You can live a busy, distracted life. You can work, eat, sleep, and pass the time. But sooner or later, something breaks the routine. A loss, a success, an illness, a sudden quiet moment. And then the question appears, what's the point of all this? Some people turn to religion for answers. In many faiths, life has a clear purpose. You're created by a higher power. You're here to serve, grow, and return to that power. In Christianity, for example, life is a test of faith and a journey toward eternal union with God. In Islam, it's about submission to Allah and living a life of moral discipline. Hinduism and Buddhism talk about karma, rebirth, and liberation from the cycle of suffering. In these views, life's meaning isn't random. It's built into the structure of the world. You exist because you were meant to. What you do matters beyond this life. But not everyone accepts religious answers. Some people are agnostic. Others are atheist. They don't see evidence for a higher power or a cosmic plan. That doesn't mean they think life has no meaning, but it does mean the meaning must come from somewhere else, maybe from within. Philosophers have debated this for centuries. Existentialists say that life has no built-in meaning. You are thrown into the world without explanation. You didn't ask to be born. You don't get a manual. But that doesn't leave you empty. It gives you freedom. You get to choose what matters. You define meaning through your actions. You create value by committing to something. Love, truth, art, justice, knowledge, family. The weight of meaning falls on you. That's a burden, but also a power. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus said that meaning doesn't exist out there waiting to be found. It's made. Camus used the image of Sisyphus, the man doomed to roll a rock up a hill forever. At first glance, it looks absurd, a pointless task, repeated endlessly. But Camus said we must imagine Sisyphus happy. He owns the task. He chooses to keep pushing. His act of resistance gives the moment value. Meaning in this view is not in the result, it's in the doing. Others approach the question biologically. They say life has no meaning in a grand sense. You're the product of evolution. Genes compete, bodies survive. You exist because your ancestors didn't die. Meaning, in this frame, is a side effect, a tool to keep you going. Love keeps the species together. Work gives structure. Goals provide focus. But these are strategies, not purposes. The universe doesn't care. It just runs. Still, even if evolution explains how we got here, it doesn't explain what we should do now. You're here. You're conscious. You want to matter. You want to live in a way that feels full. So people look for purpose in smaller places, relationships, learning, helping others. A parent finds meaning in raising a child. A teacher finds meaning in shaping young minds. A doctor finds meaning in healing. A writer finds meaning in telling the truth. These aren't cosmic answers, but they're real. Some people say meaning comes from connection, not just to people, but to something larger than the self. That might be nature, history, a tradition, a craft, a cause. When you act for something beyond your own comfort, you feel anchored. You're not just drifting, you're part of something. That doesn't have to be spiritual, it can be deeply practical. Building a house, feeding a community, defending a principle. The scale doesn't matter. The sincerity does. Other people find meaning in beauty, art, music, poetry, design. These don't solve problems, but they make life richer. They help us feel what can't be explained. A painting might not feed the hungry, but it might give someone a reason to go on. Beauty reminds us that life isn't just about survival. It's about depth. Some say the search for meaning is itself the meaning. You don't reach a final answer. You just keep asking better questions. You stay awake. You stay curious. You notice what moves you. You follow what matters. That doesn't mean you drift without aim. It means you build a life from the inside out. You grow your meaning like a tree, slowly, quietly, through daily choices. Psychologists often say that meaning comes from three things: belonging, purpose, and coherence. Belonging means you feel connected. You matter to others. Purpose means your actions feel directed. You're working towards something. Coherence means your life makes sense. It fits together in your mind. These don't require fame or wealth. They require honesty, attention, and effort. One person might find meaning in raising children, another in exploring deep questions, another in planting trees, another in making music that lifts others. There's no formula. But you can usually tell when someone has found it. They move with clarity, they don't rush, they don't complain much, they give more than they take. Loss often sharpens the question. When someone dies, or when a plan fails, you feel the ground shake. What's it all for? That's when easy answers fall away. But that's also when people often grow. Meaning isn't just about joy. It's about holding steady when things break. It's about continuing when you don't know why. Sometimes, meaning shows up after the fact. You go through pain and later realize it changed you in ways that matter. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote about this. He said that even in suffering, people can find meaning. Not because the suffering is good, it isn't, but because how you respond to it can shape your life. He said you don't ask what life means, you let life ask you, and you answer with your actions. In his view, meaning isn't given, it's offered, and you accept or reject it each day. So what is the meaning of life? It depends on how you live. It might be love, or service, or truth, or beauty, or growth. It might be all of those things, or something else entirely, but it probably won't come as a flash of insight. It will come from how you spend your time, what you notice, what you care about, and who you become. The meaning of life may not be a sentence you can say. It may be the shape of the life you lead.